Eric, it's good to see you in the chair.
Who's there? Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Good, thanks.
And see the meeting, see how I get on.
See if you can finish this one before midnight. Sure.
Members, it is 4 o'clock. I'm taking my cue from the Chief Executive there. Can I start with the statement for remote meetings? I'd like to remind everyone who is in remote, this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended according to protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on whilst speaking at the meeting, and to use the chat box, the chat facility, to highlight a request to speak. Can I emphasise keeping the mics off during the meeting unless you're actually speaking to avoid feedback, etc. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed, to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes, and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council Privacy Notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Members are all very welcome, members, officials, and presenters. Can I ask the Chief Executive to read the notice, summons of meeting, and conduct the attendance roll, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, to be held remotely today, Tuesday, the 1st of December at 4 o'clock. And as the Chair has said, starting with the roll call, Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey.
Here.
Alderman McClintock.
Here, John.
Alderman Mccready.
Here, John.
Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Donnelly.
Shaw.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Fleming.
Shaw, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor McKeever. Councillor Mooney. And Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Are there any apologies? No apologies. Moving on. Any declarations of interest? One of my own, as a former member of Londonderry Port and Harbour Commission, we have the presentation from the Commission, so I need to declare that as a former member. Any other declarations?
Yes, Chair. Same Commissioner for the Londonderry Port and Harbour Commissioners. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Mccready. Anything else?
Chair, Chair, I'm not on the
Go ahead.
committee, but can I also declare I'm a commissioner on the Foy Port?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. That being the case, can we move straight to item 4, which is the deputation? And I'm welcoming Brian, and I don't know, is George with us as well?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair. I have a couple of colleagues with me to participate. I think the intention is I'll take the lead on the on the slides, and we can maybe share the questions if I need help. But otherwise, I think the team, it was important that the team are aware of the kind of conversation and the context that we're having with council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brian. And George, good to make contact again. Presume that the chief executive said he wanted the meeting over early, and I'm sure George realised we wanted over early to maybe watch the Northern Ireland Women's. But we'll leave that for another time. Can I move and ask Stephen to take us forward with item 4, and I hope members will agree that item 8 can be taken along with item 4 if members are content with that. Any adverse to that? So Stephen, can I move to yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just ask to put the presentation up on the screen for members, please. IT got the presentation loaded. No. There we go. Thank you. So leave it at that slide and we'll take it from there. Members, today we're doing a presentation on the Freeport Stroke Innovation Zone. Myself and Brian will take this jointly. I'll do an introduction and then I'll pass over to Brian to give more detail in terms of Foyle Port, and then I'll sum up, and then we can take members' questions. And I suppose from the outset, just to acknowledge that although the consultation period opened in February of last year, or February of this year, and in my report it does mention the fact that the Northern Ireland ports were somewhat slow to take it up. This isn't true of Foyle Port. Foyle Port, I have to acknowledge, have led the way in many ways in terms of where we are and leading the charge in terms of shaping this to be something that we can use to our economic advantage. And that work continues, and what we'd like to build on today is that work. And the work that separately the council did in terms of the wider economic or the enterprise zones, and how we take this forward for the benefit of everybody in the entire region, and how we ultimately answer the exam question, which we'll get to at the end. So in that consultation, there were 3 key objectives. It was the establishment of national hubs, which would be for global trade and investment. They would be promote regeneration and job creation, and also to create hotbeds of innovation. And it was envisaged that these zones would be based around ports, airports, or rail hubs. And excuse me, the zones could potentially create customs rules with relaxed administration, rates relief, and easing. And that was the basis of which the consultation was issued. Next slide, please. So the key considerations that we have to look at in terms of Northern Ireland, I mean, obviously there's an issue with the Northern Ireland Protocol, and we don't know the exact issue with that yet, but potentially any sort of free port legislation with any sort of customs regulations may or will be different for Northern Ireland than it would be for England, Scotland, or Wales, and that's just something we have to bear in mind. But in addition, in looking at it jointly with the port and others, there's probably a limit to the competitive advantage that it would actually give us. But the real possibility around the relaxation of taxation rules, possible R&D allowances, and other such fiscal measures create this as a real interesting prospect, and something that, as I said there, could enhance the city deal and ultimately underpin a number of the projects that we are seeking to advance. The key message in all of that is also about displacement, and to make sure that in doing something creative and innovative, we don't create a zone that ultimately displaces business from one place to another and doesn't actually create any additional economic wealth. What we have to do is come up with something that is innovative but attracts new companies and new sectors. And the emerging thinking is around sectors such as fintech, green tech, advanced manufacturing, and health sciences. And indeed, Foylport will talk about their very live and real project that fits exactly into those sectors. And how do we ensure that what we're doing is something that attracts these new emerging businesses? And for that, we need a bit of space to figure that out. But that's the challenge in front of us. And the UK government just last Monday announced the competition for England. So we have an idea of what the competition would look like. We have an idea of what I suppose the exam question will be. They're looking to create 7 free ports in England. And there are a number of criteria based around that, most of which is flexible. The size of the port would be, or the size of the area could be up to 600 hectares, which is quite large. It can be split over a number of zones. It doesn't have to be one big area. So there's a degree of flexibility there. There's a limit of 45 kilometres in the English competition, and that may have to be looked at. But it also does state that this competition will be run by the devolved governments, in our case, probably through the Department of Finance. So again, that will hopefully provide a degree of flexibility of which we can compete and produce something that is really innovative. So I'm just going to hand over to Brian then to go through the Foylport side.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. And just to say on behalf of Foylport to elected members, how much we appreciate the chance to come and talk to you today on this very exciting prospect. Just to say, maybe if we could go to slide 5, I'll just, for those councillors that maybe aren't as familiar with the port as some of the others, I just want to spend a little time explaining what and who we are. So the Harbour Commissioners are an independent statutory corporation, which means we're self-funding, self-financing, we don't get any money from government, and all our profits are reinvested back into the organisation for future generations. So we don't have any shareholders as such. So our duty is to maintain the harbour and hand it on to future generations in better shape than when we took it on. So this slide shows the port's economic zone. And you'll recognise this slide, I'm sure, because it actually comes from one of your slides and one of the slide decks that was done for your city region piece. It is exactly the same region that the port's sphere of influence or markets within the Northwest reflect. So we are at the outset a cross-border institution that operates within the 2 jurisdictions, making us British and Irish simultaneously, which is unique within the British Isles. So we've got a very positive message and a very strong geographical location, which brings into play policy from both UK and from Ireland, and I'll touch upon that slightly later on. So the challenge that the port has is the need to decarbonise and to modernise. The traditional port commodities have been around oil and coal and supporting the agri sector. We support about 1,000 local jobs, and there's, I think, about 20,000 regional farms that are supplied through the activities of Foylport. So in that respect, we need to move from those old-fashioned commodities into renewables and into data, and that's part of the reason why we want to see the free port policy being used as a way to move the port into a much more sustainable position going forward for the long term. So if you could give me the next slide, please. In relation to the port's attributes that we have, we're very fortunate in a way that we've got some very, very strong attributes that really make a very good case as to why we should partner up with the council in developing your plans for your growth ambitions. So we actually have the largest available land bank to any port within the British Isles. So adjacent to the port is an industrially zoned area where there's about, I think, close to 1,000 acres there. So the port currently owns 150 acres, and we're looking to secure and buy additional acreage, probably double that acreage up to about 300 acres. It is on that land bank that we would look to put the big data projects that we're keen to develop. We're also adjacent, as you know, to what was the Project Kelvin, the Atlantic hub connection, which gives us the fastest data connectivity between Ireland and the United States, which also feeds into the data development. And significantly for that, we're the closest port with adjacent to industrial power. So there's 600 megawatts or so of industrial and renewable power, either located at Lissahallie or at Coolkira. So, you know, that the connectivity elements of this for the projects that we want to do are absolutely already in place. And for the tourism and renewable energy developments that we want to develop in the Irish side at Greencastle, we've naturally got the deepest water available at about 14 metres. So we've got deep water, we've got the land bank, we've got the electrical connection and the connectivity. Okay, next slide, please. So the one thing that I would say is that it is absolutely essential that what we do in free ports, or what we have suggested is that it be rebranded to talk about innovation zones, is that our work must be compatible with the Northern Ireland Protocol. So in that respect, we pretty much discounted the customs element of it, as Stephen has said. It might be argued that in the medium to long term, if we could satisfy people that there was nothing untoward about the kind of incentives around that it might be of benefit to attract manufacturing into our land bank. But that's not necessary in the immediate initial area of work here, where we see innovation and enterprise as the core elements. So I've put a slide up here which show really our two sides of the coin in terms of opportunities around policy and funding. So from the UK side, for the first time, we're seeing the ports recognised as being a real incubation of investment and development. And this actually sits very well with the statement of intent and the outline bid proposal, which Council developed for the City Deal. So that although that was largely an innovation piece, the City Deal model depends on strong infrastructure. And you know, it had also had identified that the port was central to future growth. So we've got the free port policy from the UK side, but we've also got the shared island agenda from the Republic of Ireland. And you know, we've got some very interesting projects which we think on an Anglo-Irish position really, that we should be part of a national infrastructure which reflects, you know, the opportunities that we have because of the geography and the two jurisdictions. So the free port happens to be, like the City Deal was, coming out of UK policy. And I think that it's generally accepted by the stakeholders that this ought to be an innovation-led piece. And that's largely what we're looking to do. So in the work that Foilport has done on this over many months, in fact, we've been on it for a couple of years now, it became quite obvious that it was unlikely, or it was not desirable, that we would be bidding against other Northern Ireland entities here. And in a way to deal with the displacement question, we felt that the best way would be to link the geography of the city deals in making that the Northwest, the City Deal for the Derry, London-Derry area, and joining up Belfast Port and Foyle Port and the Belfast City Deal geography would address largely the question of displacement. And in our submission to government, we said that a best for Northern Ireland approach would be a joined up way to do this, where we would link the best attributes of the entire area. And that will give, I think, the Derry region a really, really strong opportunity to get into these areas of fintech and green tech that Stephen talks about, and also the big data stuff that we want. So just to say to elected members, it is not our intention, unlike the Belfast submission, to actually exclusively put all of the acreage in a Derry free port located within the port at Lissahallie. We would be keen to get an allocation of acreage to do our renewable energy and our data centre developments, but we do fully recognise that you have a very large constituency, you know, out to Strabane, city centre developments and other areas where, you know, we do not see that we would be serving the area best by, you know, exclusively looking for that acreage. So it's about joining up in partnership. And really, just as these slides conclude, and I would be happy to take questions, I think the point of this session today is to encourage elected members to really swing behind the opportunity and show political leadership into this particular policy area. We find it really hard to get civil servants interested because in the past, free ports maybe had a negative connection, or people were concerned about the Northern Ireland Protocol, or for whatever reason, the civil service were very slow to get going. But in recent weeks, we have convinced Invest Northern Ireland to get the civil service departments of economy and finance primarily to really start to look afresh at how we could design a bespoke, innovation-led approach for this opportunity. And for Derry in the Northwest, it would be catastrophic to be left out of this. The Belfast stakeholders have already put a strong alliance together, which includes the Port, the City Council, Catalyst, and Queen's and Ulster universities. And I would urge elected members to allow us, if not to replicate that kind of approach, but to make sure that we are right in the mix, to make sure that we don't miss out on what could be a once-in-a-generational opportunity. So thank you, members. That's all I would like to say, and I'm happy to take things if you want to ask me any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, Chair, it's Stephen here. There's one further slide just to conclude off, and then sure we can
right. Sorry. Yeah.
You're okay. You're all right.
The last slide really just shows the extent to which we actually already have the natural attributes that would benefit from the innovation incentives that we are identifying, both from the UK government side and the executive. It's interesting that some of the legislation actually already exists. So, you know, we could get an enterprise zone set up. It was done in Coleraine. It could be done here. But I think the Freeport adds a new dimension to the whole piece in terms of innovation. And I really just put that up as a slide which shows the extent to which we might be able to apply economic levers to actually stimulate the job growth. The people in Belfast that have looked at this are talking about 34,000 jobs being created through this Freeport consultation and response. So it could be absolutely significant in relation to what we're doing. And there's nothing that they are suggesting they could do that we can't replicate in the Northwest. So hopefully that takes us, Stephen, to the end of that slide deck, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's just one further slide there, just for me to conclude off, just for members, so we tie the paper together. So just back up, and that's it. Thank you. So just to conclude, members, as the chair said at the outset, we'll take the paper and the presentation together. So it's clear that a similar competition to what has now been opened in England is going to be run here. There also appears to be a large degree of flexibility that as a devolved nation we will get, and this competition will probably run through the Department of Finance. What we're seeking today, as Brian's articulated, is that endorsement of the direction of travel, the ability to go and work as two organisations together, the Port and the Council, to work with Belfast Harbour and Belfast City Council to shape what would be a really clear, concise, integrated proposal to this competition. We don't know exactly what the rules are going to be, but we've now got a really good idea of what the exam question is. I think Brian's absolutely correct. We've got one opportunity to put something together. We would like a degree of flexibility as to exactly what that is. Some of the measures that we've outlined in terms of rates, R&D grants, etc., are all there. But I think there's also should be space for something that we haven't thought of yet, and how we attract those new industries in, and how we ensure that whatever zones we come up with, and the consultation allows for different areas and different spaces, which facilitates exactly what Brian was talking about. It could be an area around the port, it could be an area in the city, and others. So it's really taking that direction of travel and moving forward from here very swiftly, but very clearly and in a very much integrated manner. So between ourselves, we're happy to take any questions in. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. I've already welcomed George on board, and Arlene, you're in there somewhere as well. You're very welcome to the committee meeting here. I know Councillor Cooper wants to come in, but the Chief Executive wants to come in briefly before that. So after the Chief Executive, the next speaker would be Councillor Cooper. John?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brian and Stephen, and welcome also, as the Chair said, to Arlene and to George. Just very briefly from myself, Chair, and just to reiterate what both Stephen and Brian have said. Foilport have been working on this for quite some time, and we have, as well as a council, and looking at enterprise zones and innovation zones, all of which are now potentially coming together in a bespoke type proposition. I would say, just in terms of what Stephen has said a couple of times, we know the exam question. We probably don't quite know the exam question yet, but we know the answer to the question. And what we're trying to do in knowing the answer is frame the question so that we can match the answer to it. This is very much, I've said it a week or two ago, this is very much akin to the very early days of the city deal process, where government signalled its intent to run a city deal process, but there wasn't a manual that you followed to work your way through the process. You had to navigate it. You had to come up with something that worked for your own particular area, for your own particular economy. And you put together a proposition that you then went to government with and negotiated an outcome. And to some extent, this is a very similar type process. It's completely dissimilar to the process in England and Scotland and Wales, where it's a very straightforward Freeport proposition. But the proposition here will be something that is completely and uniquely linked to what we're trying to do in this city region, and indeed in the Belfast city region as well. So we do see this as something that can build upon the announcements that have already been made in respect of city deal, and tie in the ports with universities and the cities and the businesses in those cities, and to come up with a unique proposition. Whether it is something that will be acceptable is another matter, but the very strong indications we're receiving at the minute is that something bespoke to our own economy is a proposition that would be welcomed, and something that a conversation along the lines of a proposition that can be moulded would also be welcomed. So with that in mind, we have begun the discussions with Belfast, which again is a good thing because we can mould a proposition that works for both places at the same time, and begin to work from here. So that's all I have to add at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Before there's a series of councillors wishing to come in. Just before that, can I remind councillors of the recommendation at the end of item 8, which is what we will be moving to. Members consider the report, endorse the work to date, allow officers to continue to discuss the way forward. Further report will be brought to members in the coming months before any formal bid would be submitted. And can I ask members to be fairly tight on their time, stick to the presentation, and questions with regard to the presentation. There will be time, I'm sure, for comment, wider comment at a further time. Can I start with Councillor Cooper, please?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Brian and the rest of the team for the presentation. And we're well aware there's been a lot of preparatory work on this, but just going back to what was referred to earlier by Stephen and John about, we know what the question is, we know what the answer is, and we know part of the answer. From our perspective, first and foremost, as a starter for 10, when it comes to the definition, free ports, the terminology free ports, in terms of number one, the EU protocol around the north, it hasn't been answered to me either in the papers that were presented, the hundreds of pages that were presented in the report pack, or here today, what the position is of the EU in terms of pursuing any of this in any shape or form. And that's number one from our perspective. It's absolutely key that information is sought and is presented to members of this committee and indeed the full council before any proposition will come back. On the basis that that has already been factored in, there's been reference to it, and the assumption is that the EU will more than likely have some issue with the development of what is viewed as a classical sort of type of free port, and the assumption that that is already being made, then what are the other options? What are the other proposals there? Innovation has been mentioned quite a few times. Financial technology, financial services, and all of that, and the fact that the Atlantic Hub project is already obviously being developed by the port, from our perspective, is welcome, and it's a big gap. I mean, I constantly rabbit on about FDI coming here, and one of the big gaps absolutely is financial services, who do employ people at higher wages structures than other sectors in most cases, and we need to fill that gap, because we can see in Belfast, especially around the port area, around the Titanic Quarter and further afield in Belfast ports, it's one of the mainstays up there, and we don't have it here, and we need to bolster that element. And if we are, or when I say we, if the Foyle Port are working in conjunction with Ulster University here around making sure that there's no duplication of what they're trying to do around innovation projects through City Deal that are to be delivered by Ulster University, if there is a whole sort of synergy between the two organisations there, to sort of fill any gaps we have in terms of R&D, financial services, all of that. I mean, I have no issue with that at all. It's a question then of, is that being done standalone by the port in conjunction with the university to make sure both projects are complementing each other. But then when it comes to council, what do we do? How do we input into that? And it's not entirely clear to me in the sense of either as a council, even in terms of the Department for Finance, as I've heard reference made to officials being more up for this. We're still, as a party, having discussions about this in terms of not just for the port in Derry, but in the north in general, around what powers we have to allow any sort of innovative approach. But on top of that, what will we agree to in terms of any policy proposals? So the fact that we don't have fiscal powers in the north, we don't have tax raising powers in the north, in a sense, this will be a British government decision around some of those elements. And if that's done standalone by the British government, without the consultation with the Northern Executive, how that pans out, I don't know, and how that plays with us as a council. But in a sense, overall, from the Department for Finance perspective, I would be very, very keen to get a crystal clear position from themselves around, number one, if there was a proposal that there would be an entity created in the city and other parts of the north where there would be a different tax regime, what would be the Department for Finance's approach to that? I'm still not entirely clear on that. I think there's a long way to go in terms of getting clarity on that. That will be a very, very, for us, very important sort of factor going forward about, how much support we would lend to this. Again, the port is an autonomous entity in many ways, so can decide to
Councillor
pursue
Cooper,
this.
can you?
I'll conclude. We'll be obviously free to pursue some of this in their own merits. But in terms of council's buy-in to this and the buy-in of ourselves, we're very much at early stages on this, very much in our infancy around the idea of supporting it. I've gone through the entire reports around even innovation zone and enterprise zone proposals. A lot of it's not entirely clear about economic benefits, displacements, and other key issue for us as well. But again, we want to fill those gaps in the sectors, but it has to be done in a way that's not going to cause economic damage to other parts of the city, and also not damage the other work that's getting done by other organisations like Ulster University. So we're waiting until the next report comes back. Very much a holding position up until now, and hopefully by the time we come back to this, there'll be a lot more clarity. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sure,
Councillor Cooper.
Can I respond to that, Chair?
Sorry, could you hold on, Brian, please? I do have other speakers. I would have intended to have brought them in groups, but there's quite a few questions in there. So I am asking Brian to come in on this stage. But if a question has been asked, please, members, don't ask it again when we'll go to the next few speakers. Brian, if you wish to come back on this one. You're on mute, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cooper. Can I be absolutely crystal clear? The port is not pursuing a customs or tax, some sort of dodgy tax element of this at all. What we are looking to do is move to rebranding this ideally and calling it an innovation enterprise zone sort of policy. We're taking what's been given in England and trying to make it fit to deal with those displacement aspects that you talk about, not only in the city, but also across Northern Ireland. So although the port are independent, we are not trying to embark on something which is against the will of the elected members in the city or the region. So what is essential for us is that we can take the questions and answer them to your satisfaction and hopefully gain your agreement. And we know that parties have different positions on this, but we're happy to take those things on and demonstrate the merits of this in a way which does not compromise, I think, any political position, other than we want to take advantage of these incentives to generate jobs for the area. So the port are not going on a solo run here, and that's why we're very keen to work with our council partners and the other stakeholders as we go forward.
Thank you, Brian. Stephen, do you want to respond there?
If it's okay, Chair, we'll wait for the rest of the members, now I'm sure we can come on at that point.
Councillor Gallagher?
Thank you, Chair, for letting us in. Thank you, Brian, Stephen, for the presentation. And just maybe trying to combine the two presentations and looking and seeing some of the key considerations. And I know, Brian, you did mention some stuff, but not in any depth around being carbon zero and climate resilient infrastructure. I sort of was surprised I didn't see that in the key considerations that need to be given. How moving forward and how we're in a climate emergency and how we can do this around protecting the environment. And like what jumps out at me, particularly in relation to the port, was a couple of years ago there was a public perception that there was a mining company called Derry that was storing thousands of tons of tailings down in Lisnahallie and were shipping it out, and that was an element of how they were going to move forward in the future. So
sorry, it was never something that we were going to do in the future. Just be clear.
Sorry, Brian, sorry, could you let Councillor Gallagher finish his remarks and come in, and please?
Sorry, I'm not used to letting things go that need to be sort of challenged. Just we can't be going on something that is factually incorrect.
And Brian,
that's fair enough. Whenever Councillor Gallagher finishes his remarks, you will have the opportunity to come back. Thanks, Brian.
That's exactly the point, Brian, I was going to get to, was the fact that if this is untrue, then the port needs to be coming out and saying it rather than letting it float around and gain legs. That if Dalradian don't have a storage facility down there, if they're not going to be taking stuff out of it, then it would be good to hear from the port saying this is not part of our future plans. This is not going to be happening, and we won't see it happening, because any of the work we're doing, we're not going to undo the carbon impact by allowing that to happen. So the point I was making is, if it's not true, come out and say it. Let's hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. So we bit at a tangent to the actual subject we're discussing, but I take your point. Brian, you wish to come back?
Okay, Councillor Gallagher, what I would say, we'll go back a little bit as to what Dalradian did in Foyle Port. They built a shed and they stored some material that was then shipped across for analysis in Canada, I think it was, to determine what, if any, material or mineral elements they had in that. There was rumours at the time that there was arsenic being applied to it and that we were running off poisonous things into Loch Foyle, and all sorts of things. They stored material. That job's finished, and they are not located here at this point in time. The port's core raison d'etre at the minute is to decarbonise. And if I didn't make it clear enough around the zero carbon element and the emergency, I apologise for that. I should have made that quite clear. We need to move to green energy and renewables because we're too dependent on carbon-based products. But there is no question of us ever doing anything out with the law or with customers' planning limitations that they have here. So, if we need to make better public presentations about all of that stuff, I'm happy to do it. But there was a lot of misinformation that went out around what went on with Dalridian at that time, and we had a very limited relationship with them. So that's all I would say on that.
Thank you, Brian. Alderman Mccready.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Brian and Stephen. It's very welcomed. Just two administration points I picked up along the way. The slide pack didn't come out for pre-reading. That needs rectified in the future for any deputations. 2.7, the statement needs to reflect what Stephen has rectified in terms of the foil ports input as opposed to the no port engaging throughout Northern Ireland. Administration aside, just on the timelines, so this has been going on for quite some time. It did come to council, within the last 11 months, whenever the UK government, the new decade new approach came out. So we were aware of it. A real concern I have at the moment, that this is the first time that members have been presented with anything. And when you consider the scale and magnitude and the opportunities and considerations which come with it, I'm concerned it's taken so long to get to this point. And when I look at the presentations, now the declaration of interest, I have more access to information with the port side of things. But this presentation here, I was expecting more in-depth outputs from council in terms of to help members steer going forward. So I have an issue with some of the recommendations towards the end, which I'm going to present for members to consider to amend or to put in lieu. So I'll put that in the question set, which I do need a seconder for. So can I have a seconder before I continue, please, Chair?
Alderman,
there is a presentation. You can't make recommendations about the presentation.
Thank you, whoever is trying to guide me there, because that's what I was about to say. The proposal, if it's in the chat box, we'll consider the proposal at the end of the debate. Okay. Have you finished, Councillor or Alderman?
No, my apologies. When you were going to merge both the item number 8 and the deputation, I was under the assumption that we were at that point. So my apologies, and I'll defer that to later on.
We are, but I'll take any proposal.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks, Chair. So just looking at the free port concept, there's around 3,500 ports worldwide. It's not a new concept, albeit that we will have some nuances with the Northern Ireland Protocol and other issues which we've identified. A really good example is Shannon Free Zone. When I looked and studied that at the beginning of this year, it's impressive. It really is. Back to 1950 to where they're at now with 7,000 jobs. Clearly, along the way, they had a European Union connection, which they had to modify that slightly, which brings me to the concern from the previous speaker about the European Union's acceptance or not. 1st of January, Northern Ireland will not be part of the European Union. I have no idea the impact of that in terms of the protocol for Northern Ireland, but certainly if we do go down a free ports or a connotation from that with the innovation zone, free enterprise, I hope we very much learn the lessons from the good points in Shannon, but also have something which is future-proofed and forward-thinking, like the enterprise and innovation zones. So I welcome all the comments, and I'd like to keep this going as a matter of course. And when I get to item 8, I'm happy to explain the rationale to expedite this and keep it on members' radar, as it is important. Thanks, Chair.
Brian or Stephen want to come in at this stage on Alderman Mccready's remarks?
Happy to follow up in terms of the presentation. That it was sent in plenty of time, so it should have gone out to members. So apologies for that. I didn't realise it hadn't gone out. And in terms of clarification on the point in the report, again, happy to take that, and that'll be clarified in a minute. So that'll be for the record, and then we can consider the proposals at the appropriate time, Chair.
Moving on to Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in, and thanks to Brian and his team, and to Stephen and John for talking us through all of this so far. In terms of this concept of a free port, my party leader and the MP for Foyle, Colin Eastwood, has already outlined where we as a party stand on this. We all know that Brexit is is happening at the end of this month. Now that we're into December, there are still a lot of questions unanswered about Brexit. Never mind this concept of free ports, which, as others have indicated, is a concept that is being drawn up at the moment. We recognise that we will be hit hardest by Brexit. That's why we canvassed against it. I'm not looking to open up that whole debate about Brexit again, but I do think that we do need to look at other mechanisms and other ways of trying to attract in investment and attract in high paid, well earning jobs into this region. So happy with the recommendation that was on the original paper that was presented to us today, in terms of allowing officers to continue with the conversations with the port and other stakeholders about how we can move this forward. I'm looking at Alderman Mccready's proposal that he's put in the chat box as well. At the first glance, we don't see a huge difference between what was on the order paper and what has been put in the chat box by Alderman Mccready. So we see that specifically, I suppose, the second point of what he's indicating at 5.2, that sort of regular conversation at GSP committee on this is
Councillor Riley, sorry, we haven't got that as a proposal yet. I haven't accepted it as a proposal yet. So can we stick to the presentation? We'll get to the proposal at the end of these conversations.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So in terms of the presentation, happy with what has been presented at this early stage, and certainly knowing that it is at an early stage. I think that's the opportunity today for people to hear from people. We appreciate the work that has gone into the presentation has been given, and certainly we were content to move forward with the original option that was on the recommendation at item 8, which is to allow officers to continue that types of engagement with the port and others. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I'm moving straight to Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in here. Thanks for the presentation. Some of my concerns concerns that have been made to me by the sort of host community in and around Strathfoyle and Maydown, and there's issues. There's issues over some of the industrial zonings and potential plans for the future. And a lot of residents, or at least some residents, are concerned that the needs of the community regarding social housing and community need haven't been factored into this. And this is a community that in the past there's been all sorts of issues with the port and surrounding areas, with infestations, like rats and flies. There's been fires in the area, and it's all about good neighbours too. There is a settled community there, but is the needs of the community going to be taken on board regarding social housing and community infrastructure? I understand that there was a report in the past commissioned by a council. I think it was done by Ben Cable Consultants, Leeds, and there was a number of issues that came up in that. I think some of the concerns was about the accumulative effect of the existing industries being detrimental to the health and well-being of local residents. As the Port Authority is going to tie in with the residents and local stakeholders regarding a lot of these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. And before I move to Councillor Harkin, non-committee member, and Councillor Ferguson also, could I ask any comeback there from Brian or Stephen on the couple of points raised?
Yeah, Chair, if I may, thank you, Councillor Donnelly, for your point, and it's a very well made point. It is essential that the Port Authority and the local community we are good neighbours to the local community. And in that respect, what I would say to you is that we have made a fulsome report to your local development plan, so that the council's plans in terms of industrial zoning and also the need for housing are something which are quite a challenge to reconcile the mixture of industry and people living adjacent to us. So we, in our submission, have taken that into account. What I would say is that we try very hard to be good neighbours, and I would say that that Ben Cave report that you refer to is, I would say that that was a very flawed piece of work which did not serve either us or the community well. And there is we're on the record for having put a very strong response to that, which was really alleging that there was cumulative ill effects on the community's health. And in that sense, I think that we will be working very closely with council and you as elected members to make sure that we each understand what we're trying to do. The port is located at Lissahalli here, and we have an obligation and a duty to develop that business to generate jobs and to be able to share that job creation and wealth creation with the community. So it's not in our interest to be undermining the well-being of the residents, but by the same token, the policies need to be sympathetic to each other so that we're not putting people and houses right in the middle of an industrially zoned area. I would say that the demise of industry in the Derry region over the last 40 years is one of the major contributory factors as to why there's such deprivation in the area. So what we want to do is reinvigorate that industrially zoned area to generate new jobs, but not at the expense of the well-being of the local people. That's not what we want to do, and we want to do it in a very green and renewable way. So I think that I hope covers that point raised.
Thank you, Brian. Just at this point, I'm aware that members of committee will have received a communication from an organisation, and they're simply asking that our committee would be endorsing council's submission on the consultation response to UK government with regard to free ports. I don't think anybody on the committee has an issue with the particular correspondence that we received, which may address some of the issues that Councillor Donnelly brought there. Moving on to Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you for the presentations. And I guess a couple of the issues I wanted to ask, one was about, Paul raised it about Dalradian and Gary about the community. But I would say, right, on the Dalradian issue, look, it did damage, I think, people's confidence in the port, that Dalradian were able to use the port for what is a very, very contentious issue that we've taken a vote here as council.
Sorry, Councillor Harkin, I believe that issue has been dealt with. Can we move to your next points, please?
Well, the second issue is about the community. I hear what Brian said there in response, but there is tension right now with the local community. I had to go to court with Paul Hughes and Eamon O'Donnell when they were charged outside of Foyle Port on the issues that he's talking about, and of course the judge found them to be right in their actions. But so I just want to, the point is that there are tensions with the people who live in the vicinity of Foyle Port, and that has to be acknowledged. So any kind of consultation has to be carried out thoroughly, for expansion. And then the third one is really about the issue itself. I mean, I've heard the words free port, free enterprise zone. And at the end of the day, no matter how this gets wrapped up, these are Tory buzzwords, as far as I'm concerned, that haven't worked out very well in terms of addressing inequality in the places where they've been brought in, because they've been used by employers to evade taxes, to evade workers' rights, to evade health and safety. So I hear that, like, we are going to try and make this work for us. But I'm not sure you can take what is a Tory policy and then make it work for the vast majority of people. And that's the danger. So if I could hear more about, like, how exactly what the plan is to not have this be a repeat of the type of Tory enterprise zones that we've seen spread in different places. Plus, there's one example of the Canary Islands where they have a free port, an enterprise free zone, and it's 4% taxes there. corporate taxes, whereas in Spain it's 25%. So that's a great concern that the Tories call this a plan to turbocharge the economy, but their plans don't necessarily lead to more equality. They actually lead to more inequality. So that's and I haven't fully heard how we're going to get around that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. I'm mindful that we're simply considering the report and a further report to be brought. So I'm taking views have been taken on board will be addressed when the report comes down the line. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me in. Again, as I said, I'm also a commissioner on the Londonderry Foyle Port, but I'm also a member of the local community that has been raised a few concerns in here. And what I can say is I do have these conversations with Brian quite a lot, and Brian understands that there's a communication needed with the local community. He is currently allowing myself and some of the members of the team come together with a safety forum. So if that puts anybody's mind at ease, we are trying to have that conversation with the community. They do a lot of work when there is issues. I think there's a misconception around what the port does and what the actual people who are using the port. So, for example, there's an issue with coal, which isn't necessarily the port, but the people that are supplying coal. And so we are trying to have that conversation with the community. What I would say is, obviously I can't vote on this one, but I would say, looking at this report, look at the point that Northern Ireland are to get at least one free port. Innovation is key in our city, Dean. Do we want to be back in that position where we go, oh, well, we didn't get it? I think that it's key for us to work with the port, and the port are very open to changing and open to ideas and coming up with new ways and making sure that nobody is impacted badly on this behalf. So I think, if anything, we need to take the decision now to work alongside the port to make sure that we, as a city and district, don't lose out. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I have nobody else coming in at the moment.
Yes, Chair, my name's in the chat box. Hilary.
Sorry. Yeah, but I seen you as a seconder there. But you want to come in on the debate?
Very briefly.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Atlantic.
Thank you, Chair. It is a very brief comment. I just think this could be such a positive thing for our city and district. This is all about the possibility of job creation, the possibility of innovation, the possibility of increased trade, the possibility of economic benefit for our city and region, in fact the whole north west region. And I think really to listen to Councillor Harkin trying to turn this into a negative, we need to find out more about this. We're in the beginning of a process. We need to find out more. We need to keep this on our agenda, and we need to be a wee bit more positive about bringing innovative ideas to our city and district. Thank you, Chair.
Atlantic, I thank you for your brevity. Councillor McCann, you're coming in next. Over to you.
Yes, well, I mean, I don't want to be negative at all. I want to be positive, but we have to make fine judgments here at times. If it were suggested, for example, that in order to speed sort of economic development within this proposed zone, one can imagine somebody suggesting, well, what we need here is to lift sort of regulations, restrictions, and so forth to do. We've already mentioned the economy. I would also mention it, and I'm basing this on having looked at free ports and free trade areas and zones sort of around Europe and so forth. You know, we've got them very big in Poland, and I've read up a bit sort of on how they work in Poland. That's where we now get Roundtree's chocolate, for example, is made in an enterprise zone in Poland. And why did they go there? They're very open about it. They went there because there were rock bottom taxes, and there's some other provisions to do with health and safety. So, according to workers and trade unions in Poland, have been eased. Sort of restrictions dropped. That is not a good thing. It's not a good thing for ourselves. I'm not saying sort of that that's in anybody's plans at the moment. I'm saying that based on experience elsewhere, it could possibly emerge. And of course, if you look at them, you can Google this, the controversy in Poland. The reason why I keep mentioning it, I've had a close look sort of on all this, and the answer to concerns about health, safety, trade union rights, employment rights, and so on, all of which have been raised out there. The answer is always employment, jobs. you're standing in the way of jobs. You're standing in the way of any sort of economic advance and so on. And we've had that. That's been a constant sort of at every stage of the development of capitalism. People have said that. Let it all rip free. Let it all run free. Stop putting restrictions on this because you'll choke off possible jobs. What I'm saying in general terms is that as we go forward, and I agree sort of that the council officers must go forward with this and work with everybody who's involved on the assumption that it comes back at every stage to the council for our endorsement. But I think in general terms, I would sort of just flag those worries at the meantime. In the meantime, I know they can't be given specific answers at the time, but be aware that there is that feeling, quite apart from the feeling of some local residents down there, that, for example, that area between Maydown sort of and Strathfoyle. And people look and say, well, what's going to become of that? Is that going to be industrial? What's it going to be? And if it's industrial, people say, well, we've got to get jobs, so we've got to put it there and so on. There are questions which have to be answered, questions which have to be asked before we look for answers. You know, we're at that stage. So it's I think we have a long way to go in this, and I'm sure Brian and everybody else will be aware we've got a long way to go in this, and there may be a few bumps along the road.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. Yes, there's a long way to go. There's reports to be brought, questions to be answered. I know the Chief Executive wants to come in, but I have just one more councillor wishing to come in the debate. Councillor Fleming, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome Brian and his team in terms of the report and the work that is going on at the report, and obviously what we hope to achieve in the future. And I know Councillor Cooper has spoken on this, but just a couple of points, and some of them have been made, Chair, but I do need to sort of reiterate in terms that there has been experiences down there in terms of the community with the wider Strathfoyle and Maydown, certainly feeling that they were in a good position set aside industry. And I know Brian talked about facets of the port changing over the next 15 years. Obviously, the point of social housing in the local development plan has been mentioned and acknowledged. I do welcome Brian saying about in terms of good neighbours, but I do think there has to be more formal conversation and formal consultation with the local community through the groups that represent it, and obviously ourselves as elected rep. But I don't think that conversation has been its fullness as of yet. I do think it does need to take place, and we also need to take cognizance as council and as a council who are developing the local development plan to try and really facilitate two interests, and maybe even more than two interests, in terms of local industry, local enterprise, local initiative, but also in terms of a very vibrant community and exactly enlarging down there with further developments. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. I know the Chief Executive wants to come in on the point that's to be proposed, Chief Executive, or on the debate generally.
Maybe a bit of both, Chair, if you would allow me to speak to both.
That's okay, thank you.
So, Chair, firstly, and to members, thanks very much for all of your comments today. It's actually a very interesting discussion and debate and around the issue. I suppose a couple of wee things I just wanted to pick up on, just listening to some of the points raised by members. The first thing is just to re-emphasise again that this may very well be the last time we refer to the report going forward as a report around free ports. Because again, it started off in response to the UK government's consultation on free ports, but it's already clear that free ports in the traditional sense that members have talked about that exist elsewhere in the world, or indeed that will come forward in GB under the government's initiative, will not work in Northern Ireland. They simply will not work in Northern Ireland. So a lot of the negative issues associated with free ports will not form part of this proposal because it simply doesn't work. And so what we're trying to do here, and I think Alderman Mccready mentioned that it's been out for 7 months and there's been very little said about it. Up to now, during that period, if it had been a proposition that would have worked in Northern Ireland, they would come forward from the ports themselves. And one of the reasons that it hasn't come forward is for that very reason. It doesn't work here. So what we're trying to do is look to see how it might become a more city-owned proposition, with the port being a key partner. And Brian referred to this earlier. This is the approach that we've been discussing with Belfast. And that's very much not a free port proposition, but something that supports the development of innovation in certain places. And those places could still be some on port lands, could be in city centre lands and around the university along the riverfront. It could be in different places across the city and district. And so this proposition that we're trying to pivot to now is, if government is saying it's open to a unique proposition from this part of the world, then what might that unique proposition look like? And this is the space that we think we're now in, building on the city deal potential. And some of the comments raised by other members about addressing inequality and inequalities absolutely quite rightly. This goes back to our strategic inclusive growth plan, trying to build sustainable investment that is linked to innovation, which is linked back to research, the growth of the university, all of those things. And then how we incentivize companies to spin off that and perhaps set up in this region as a result of those investments. So that's where this is beginning to move to. It may not be successful. It's going to have a very long journey in terms of trying to shape it and mold it and see if it will be acceptable by government. And that's why I referred back earlier to the very early days of the city deal conversation, where of course we weren't clear on how that might turn out either, and there was no roadmap for success. It's about trying to build something that may or may not work here. So all of those checks and balances that members talked about today will have to be considered as we go through this process. And then we will have to decide, is it something that we want to do as a council or not? But at this minute in time, just to be clear, as Brian has also said, it's not about tariffs, it's not about customs, it's not about a big swathe of land in a Singapore type fashion out at Foyle Port. That is a tax evasion type scenario. It's much more akin to trying to develop sustainable, well-paid jobs in this council area that are aligned to the growth of the university, the innovation projects, the city deal, green tech, and in doing so, potentially delivers on the objective of the city and also helps deliver on the objective of the port to move away from its heavily industrialized past to maybe more green tech type sustainable options. And in doing so in partnership with Belfast, means hopefully that we come forward with a proposition that doesn't have a winner and a loser, and we don't get ourselves into a situation where potentially we end up on the losing end of a conversation with government. So many questions yet to answer, no guarantee of success, no roadmap as to how this might be taken forward. But the clear direction from government we're getting is, if you want to work up something that works for you as cities, then please do so. And we will engage in a conversation about how that may or may not be deliverable. In terms of how we take it forward from here, as Stephen has indicated in the report, we intend now working, if you're comfortable today, members, we intend to continue working with our colleagues in Belfast, with our colleagues in both ports, with our colleagues in the university to try and shape this up a little more. And we will bring back in regular updates. There's no time limit, there's no deadline that we're working to. We're simply trying to gain traction with this. It may be a little ambitious to try to bring in a monthly report because, quite frankly, there's probably very little going to happen from 1 month to another. We'll probably bring in a report as we achieve the next milestone to get your comments and suggestions around it. But simply to put that into context, many of the issues that members have raised today are simply not issues that would be part of this proposal going forward. And from now on, we'd be probably referring to them as some form of innovation zone proposal, of which the ports are a part. Thank you, Chair. So, Chair, you're on mute there, and we didn't hear what you said there.
I'll get used to all of this eventually. I'm concluding the on the proposal that has come forward. There will, sorry, the presentation. There will be a proposal coming forward with regard to the recommendation and possible changes in that. To Brian, George, Arlene, do you wish to add anything before we move on?
Chair, thank you. Can I just say how much we appreciate the chance to come and field the questions. I understand that some councillors are coming to this at various stages and with various perceptions and understanding of all of this. So we're more than happy to take the challenges that you put to us, and we fully appreciate the need for Foyleport to integrate within the community in which we're placed here. So we will work very carefully and very closely with your council officers in order to satisfy you at the end of the day. We're not going to be able to do this without your support. So thank you so much. And on behalf of Foyleport, we'd just like to say we do appreciate it, and we will be happy to furnish you with any additional information in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. As we move on, moving on then, we have the recommendation 5152. Alderman Mccready, you wish to come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The rationale is the report presented by Stephen and the consultation response to the government was extensive, really good reading, lots of opportunities, and outlaid a lot of the considerations and key factors. The concern I had with the work to date was...
Sorry, Alderman Mccready, are you making a proposal? Can we have the proposal and seconding?
Okay, proposal is as read in the chat box, and I'll take a seconder, Chair.
I have a seconder in the chat box, but I need to hear it. Alderman McClintock?
I'm happy to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Carry on, Alderman.
Thanks, Chair. So, in brief, I just wanted to be a bit more concise on what we do going forward. So, the 5.1 is very similar, but the 5.2 about members just having more of a handle on this to ask questions, to get feedback, incrementally throughout the year. And if initially it was 6 months, great. Do we get it in a position where we're comfortable to make a decision? But at the moment, throughout the last 10 months, I haven't been assured of Council's position, the workings up to that point. And I think as a member of this committee, I would like it in the agenda item until further notice, or 6 months until we get to a more stable position.
Thank you, Alderman Mccready. Alderman McClintock, do you wish to come in as seconder?
Yes, just briefly. I would just like to say that today has been very, very useful. There's been a lot of information here, and for people who haven't been across the subject before, there has been a lot to take on board. And I think actually the information today that free ports will not work in Northern Ireland, that's very useful information. But I think there is an opportunity here. This could be as big a city deal for us. This could be a big part of our strategic growth plan. And I think it is important that we keep tracking the progress and just seeking guidance and asking questions on a regular basis with council officers, which is why I'm seconding this, because I think it's important that we keep the impetus going and that we know exactly where we are with regular updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Cooper wishes to come in the proposal.
Thanks, Chair. Well, just to reiterate what I said earlier, from our perspective, first and foremost, we have to seek clarity from not just the EU. I mean, that was, and I stated it very clearly that the idea around the free port in a classic sense, we're expecting that will not be a runner. We already stated that. It's around the other proposals, around tax in particular. And it made the point that, the British government in London, in terms of their tax position and all of this, could work with the ports when we, in one sense, when we say we can't stop that happening. I'm not entirely clear what is allowed to happen in terms of what's devolved or not through the Department for Finance. So I would much rather we go with the original recommendation, that we get a report back once those discussions have been had with the EFF in particular, to get that clarity, because the wording, because it's 5.2 in one sense, I've a wee bit less an issue yet than 5.1 in terms of the wording and their continued preparatory works by a joint up approach. What that sort of means in terms of council preparing any joint bid or anything like that, I think we're a wee bit jumping the gun, because we have to see that clarity coming back from the department first, because I want to make sure as a council we're pursuing a proposal here, pursuing a project that we know that government here in the north is content with, and the sponsor department, the EFF, is content with, before we then embark on any working up. I don't think it'll take long to get that information back. I mean, I'm not proposing that we would be dragging this out. We get that clarity back first of all from the department, and if they're content with what the port is proposing, I think then we can start to fast track this to try and work this up. Because, and go back to what I said earlier, we're not against any of this in terms of filling the gap around job creation in specific sectors. No issue at all. I mean, Brian referred to a dodgy tax deal. I didn't say anything remotely in that direction at all, and I just want that on the minute. The point we're making is we have to make sure that the department in the north is content with this, because first and foremost, we'll take our direction from there. And then if there's a joint bid being prepared, and again, we're still clarifying even if that can be done. I'm not entirely sure even if that is what is going to happen. But I'd rather get that information back first of all, which is why we'd be content with the original proposal as opposed to the wording of the amended proposal from Alderman Mccready. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Boyle wishes to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, Chair, I mean, there's very little difference between the original that was on the paper and the proposal from Alderman Mccready. However, we're of the view, sharing a very similar view, actually. It may well be a little bit premature to be expecting monthly updates and reports on something that needs to be teased out further. Perhaps further consideration should be given to that kind of time frame of a monthly report. The original recommendation through the officer report seemed like a logical approach. But again, we're not going to die in a ditch about it. But I really, at this point, similar to Councillor Cooper, don't really see the necessity for a monthly report coming to this particular committee at this particular juncture. Notwithstanding all of that, and you'll know this, and many other members will too, Chair, but that this will run in tandem with the local development plan process as well, which has some considerable distance to run itself. So perhaps the use of the phrase glacial pace wouldn't be accurate, but this will not be a sprint. Obviously, the Chief Executive's already pointed that out as well, and I'm cautious about asking officers to bring reports to committees when they haven't really got much to tell us, perhaps, and we should maybe be a bit more realistic than expecting something every month.
I'm going back to Alderman Mccready, and I do take on board the point being emphasised there, and indeed officers have said that there may be nothing to report. So rather than stipulating that it would be a standing item, is there a possibility of saying a periodic item? As the point has been made, is there a point in bringing a report if there's nothing to report? Over to you, Alderman Mccready.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome all the members' comments. Really good discussion. The reason why I did bring it up to be prescriptive in a way that it's brought up within GNS Monthly is not only just to receive information from officers on progress, but to ask questions and to present ideas that we get from our electorate and communities and groupings to really feed into this, to get a better understanding of it and to shape it. Because I don't want to be here in 2 years' time and looking at Belfast and saying, look at their free innovation zone, and we just weren't really 100% on it and we missed out. I think it's unforgiving, and for the sake of just having it on the agenda item, if after 3 months it says no change, no change, no change, then I'll probably raise questions on why is there no change, or just accept that the update's going to take a little bit longer. Just to clarify the point of that 5.1, it's non-committal. So the output is similar in a way that your officers can continue preparatory works in line with what they've already been doing, but they can have more of a reassurance that this committee has now given them direction and guidance to maybe join up the thinking, because ultimately there's only going to be one bid within Northern Ireland. If we're done on it, we're not part of it. And I think that would really do a lot of damage to us as a region, city and district. So I really want to just maybe press on members to really follow this one through and accept my amendments. I don't think it's much to ask for. Thanks, Chair.
At this point, can I ask the Vice Chair, Councillor Fleming, could you take over for a couple of minutes? Something has happened in the background here that I need to attend to. Councillor Fleming, Vice Chair.
If only I knew how to, Councillor Hussey.
John will assist you. It's an emergency that's happened in the background.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
John, can you hear me? No?
Yes, I can, Councillor Fleming.
Yeah, but do I need to do anything other than try and move this forward? No?
Well, I'm just checking the chat box. I don't think anybody else wants to come in. Sorry, maybe Councillor Gallagher does he?
Yeah. Thank you. Just in regards to the proposal, I think that the new proposal come forward is a world of difference to what's in the recommendation. And I would prefer that we went with the recommendation that's in the report. There's a lot of twists and turns on this, and the proposal has a sound of a predetermination on it, and I don't think that we should be at a stage yet where there's a predetermination. And I wouldn't be supporting the Councillor Mccready's proposal.
So, Chair, at this stage, you have no further input in the chat box, and you have a proposal on the floor which is seconded, which perhaps doesn't sound unanimous. So I'll leave that with you.
I was just going to suggest, John, or say, John, if somebody else wanted to speak to it, if yourself would take the vote on. Just thinking, just as well, I wasn't in the chase there.
Okay, sorry, Chair, I lost you there for a second. Did you ask me to take a vote?
Yes, John, if you would, please, on the amendment.
Okay. So we have, in relation to the proposal from Alderman Mccready, seconded by Alderman McClintock, Alderman Breslin.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman Mccready.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Michaela Boyle. Councillor Michaela Boyle. Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Donnelly.
Hello.
Councillor Donnelly.
John.
Sorry, Gary, was that you?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy.
Against, John.
Councillor Fleming.
Against, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor McKeever. Councillor McKeever. Councillor Mooney.
Against, John.
Councillor Riley.
Against, John.
Thank you, members.
Sorry, John, against.
Is that Councillor McKeever?
John, Michaela here, against. Sorry, I'm having problems here just.
Okay, I got you there. Thank you. Chair, I've recorded 4 for and 10 against. So the amendment falls, and you're back to the original recommendation in the report. for consideration.
Yeah, appreciate that, John. Thanks for that. And I just see a proposal coming from John Boyle. It looks to be as well a second from Councillor Paul Gallagher. So if people that voted for the amendment are going to vote against the overall proposal, they maybe let us know. And if this is, please. Ryan, are you looking in, Ryan?
No, just saying I'm for the original one if that fell. Thanks, Paul.
Paul, you're on mute there.
Folks, it's actually Paul's connection is not great at all. We've had this all afternoon, so previous meetings with ourselves. So
it looks like we have the chair back, Vice Chair.
Thanks back.
There we go.
If you're content, Paul.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay. We have the original proposal. It's been proposed by Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor Gallagher, I'm presuming, to get ahead. Paul, thank you. Is there anyone against the original proposal?
Chair, just to be clear, proposed by Councillor John Boyle, because we've two Boyles on this call.
Oh, my apologies, John. Proposed by Councillor John Boyle. And there's only one Paul, so agreed, members? Thank you. Can we move to chairperson's business? I haven't had any notification from anyone that they want to raise any matter. On a personal note, I'm sure members will agree that congratulations should go to St. Cecilia's on their National Teaching Award that they've received. You know, in 2018, I had several engagements with the school there. Fantastic school, and they're to be only wholeheartedly congratulated on that. If I'm ready to move on, seeing no further comment. Right, moving to agenda item 6, the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting on the 3rd of November. Don't need accuracy, I think, because accuracy has already been cleared via the council. And matters arising, any matters arising relative to this committee that haven't already arisen or that won't be dealt with as we move on. I'm checking with you, John. Am I correct in saying we don't need this proposed and seconded? It's already been passed via full council? Is that correct? Thank you. If there's no further item reference the minutes, I am suggesting a 10-minute comfort break. Are members content with that? Okay, it is now 25, let's say 25 to 20 to 6. Okay, members? We return at 17:40. It's 13 minutes. Thank you, members.
Derek, can I just be clear that we can leave now as far as...
Certainly, Brian. I didn't realize you were still with us there. There's quite a few names.
Yeah.
And as I say, thank you very much for your contribution and best wishes to all.
Thanks, sir. It's good to catch up. Thanks. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Resuming in 1 minute, members. If we're ready to go back on stream, Wendy's in the background. So most members are rejoining, and Uno will be up next.
Thank in terms of the resolution in relation to the Hardship Fund, and you may recall that it was agreed at the October Council meeting that the Welfare Reform Group will be asked to meet to consider how best the recommendation could be taken forward with respect to establishing a Hardship Fund. And the Welfare Reform Group met on 2 occasions and gave very careful consideration to a number of factors in relation to the establishment of a fund, and you can see that they're highlighted in the report that I've provided. Members, the logistics and the feasibility were of the main concern for elected members, particularly in relation to if it was feasible to do this under the power of competency. And our legal advice at that stage was to say that we may require external advice, and that advice would not be obtainable prior to Christmas. Members also considered what other supports already out there, and noted in particular some of the national and international programmes that are available, such as Save the Children and the Red Cross, in addition then to some local initiatives. And members commended the fantastic work, particularly within local communities, that have been undertaken, particularly in relation to advice services and all those organisations that were providing really, really valuable services to individuals who find themselves in great difficulties presently in terms of being able to access what available support is out there. So members, you can see that in summary of 3.4 of the report that the Welfare Reform Group were of the opinion that Council in its endeavours in relation to a hardship fund should make sure that we worked with organisations that were already supporting people, so partnership was considered to be really, really important. Secondly, they considered that the eligibility criteria, that they noted that for some programmes it was much easier to access funding and support. For others it was more difficult, and what inevitably happens is that there are people who slip through the cracks and don't actually get the support that they require. So they wanted to make sure that whatever eligibility was determined, that it would be able to support everybody who currently found themselves in hardship. And finally, that local organisations have a wealth of knowledge and understanding in terms of the difficulties that people face, and that they're based in localities and communities, and have access to information and been able to support individuals, and that they would like, the elected members of the Welfare Reform Group would like those communities and organisations to be involved in any form of delivery. And taking all of that into consideration, it was recognised that we have a very, very small window of opportunity between now and Christmas in terms of being able to support people in hardship, and therefore there's 2 recommendations before members today. One is that we would take forward stage 1, which is activity between now and Christmas, and therefore if we could do some immediate activity that would support people, and that then there would be a second stage that would take a bit longer in terms of establishing the feasibility of a fund going forward. So members, if I can draw your attention to stage one. Stage one was recognising that there's already programmes out there and that there's one that's a joint initiative that has been established for a number of years that receives very strong support, which is the Salvation Army and St Vincent de Paul. And that where possible that we should be encouraging businesses to support, and that we would be promoting businesses to support, if it's at all possible, this current initiative. And also members, that given the fact that there's quite extensive support out there, that we should also be making it as easy as possible for people to access that support, so that we'd be drawing some kind of promotional activity and in terms of awareness raising of what's already there. And then with respect to stage two, that we would get the advice from Belfast in terms of the approach that they have taken, and also that if it was appropriate and if we felt that it was necessary, that we would take external legal advice in relation to a hardship fund. But the whole basis will be to work in partnership with organisations who already provide this type of support, and also working with the local community sector and voluntary sector in terms of the delivery of that support. Members, with respect to stage one, there's no financial equality, legal, HR improvement or rural needs implications that would come forward with respect to the recommendation from the Welfare Reform Group. However, we did want to draw your attention to the fact that officers are currently exploring if council would have any opportunity to provide some financial assistance that would help some of these initiatives between now and Christmas. And we will propose that we've a bit more work to do in relation to that, and that we will come back with an update for the reconvened council meeting on Friday with the determination if that was possible or not. But in the meantime, with respect to this particular paper, we're presenting to you now the recommendations from the Welfare Reform Group, on that basis that there would be a stage one, which is the activity to move forward with between now and Christmas, which is encouraging and promoting to local businesses to support the St Vincent de Paul and the Salvation Army campaign, and also to promote what existing support's already there. And secondly, that we would move forward and scope out under stage two the feasibility of a medium-term hardship fund, that we would then take further reports and papers through this committee. So I await any comments or questions in relation to that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Una, for a very comprehensive report. The Chief Executive wants to come in before that, and then it will be Councillor Duffy, Alderman McClintock and Councillor Harkin, I think, have requests to speak. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, both to thank Una for the work to date, and also the working group, the Welfare Reform Working Group, which has met, I know, a few times to consider this very imaginative idea. And it's not to change the recommendation, but simply to build upon what Una has just alluded to there. Obviously, it's a changing situation, and since the report was written, we do feel, and given some of the comments that have been made by members as well, and the time of year and the short period of time left between now and Christmas, we do feel that we, in the next day or two, if you were so minded, we will try to look at a potential financial contribution by council to stage one of the process, whether that's affordable and potentially the quantum, and indeed just a few other issues in terms of the bodies to whom it might be granted to and the legality around that. We would intend to try to cover off that piece of work in the next couple of days. And I think, as Una has said, we met this morning to discuss it. And there is an opportunity, if you're minded to go down that route, and it is possible to take a definitive position on that at full council, the reconvened full council on Friday. So obviously not trying to preempt the discussion today, but just to let you know that since writing, we've been trying to move the issue on a little further and present that opportunity to you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. That's extremely useful. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and thank you, Una, for the extensive report, and John for that update in terms of the information. around the financial contribution, which would be most welcome, I have to say. The report, absolutely welcome it. Welcome the work of the working group. And it was a really good motion. It was a really good proposal that came in, but probably it came in slightly late in terms of Christmas this year. I know in terms of my own work in the homeless sector, we have been preparing for Christmas from late August, early September. So it probably just was a bit late for this year. But in terms of the report, I would propose the recommendations are accepted. I think that there are really good organisations out there that I have been working with in terms of the Salvation Army, and that should continue. And then for stage 2, we look then at the legal advice and how we can provide for it going forward. I know in my own experience that January is a very bleak month anyway. So if we can provide a hardship fund in the new year, that would probably be the most welcome time as well. So thank you for that, and thank you for the report, and I'd like to propose the recommendations are accepted.
Thank you for your proposal. Alderman McClintock.
For letting me in, and thanks to Una and to the working group, the Welfare Reform Group, who have obviously put a lot of work in behind the scenes on this. It's a motion that obviously is so timely, but as Councillor Duffy said, maybe we've had to rush this a wee bit before Christmas. I suppose I am aware, and it's great to see that particularly the neighbourhood partnership boards at the moment have access to a great deal of food parcels, and that they are working to make sure that as many people as possible are covered in the run up to Christmas, and also see they're even able to access things like white goods as well. So I think anything we do moving forward, it would be good to link in with them, because we obviously don't want to be duplicating. And I don't think it's a declaration of interest, but I haven't been on the Waterside Neighbourhood Partnership Board meeting this morning where this was agreed. There is a lot of help out there for people in the run up to Christmas. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Duffy again that January will be the really bleak time for a lot of people, because at the moment we're hearing of food parcels, hampers, turkeys and all going out there. So although we do what we can obviously in the short term, I think going forward we have to look at the bigger picture, and I think it's wise to learn from Belfast, who seem to be ever so slightly further ahead than us on this process, to see what the implications are and to learn any lessons for them. I just thought, Chair, it would be a lovely idea, absolutely no issue, and would actually second the proposal made by Councillor Duffy. I think the Salvation Army and the St Vincent de Paul are a good way to go forward. But wouldn't it be great if we could encourage all our own councillors and even our own staff to contribute something to Salvation Army and St Vincent de Paul and the run up to Christmas? I don't want to make that as a proposal, because it's obviously up to people's individual conscience. But if for instance, staff were so minded, if there was some facility or whatever that they could give maybe a token amount or whatever, I think that would be a very good way to show that we really are standing with people and trying to help them at this time. So thank you, Chair, for that.
Thank you. I don't know if folk can hear me there, but I seem to have gone out of the meeting here. I know that Councillor Harkin, if you can hear me, you may be next.
Thanks, Chair. So we can hear you and we can see you. So you're all right there. Yeah. So thanks to Una for the report, and to John for the update, and I do appreciate the work that officers put into trying to figure out how to move forward this proposal. Because yes, it was brought late, and that's because I think people beyond this council are feeling the pressure of the type of deprivation that's around us right now, because we are in a very difficult situation and people want something done urgently. So I think that that there's good thought that's been put into the two phases of the proposal. It kind of does veer away, I would say, from the original proposal, just to be clear. So what John was saying there about the council's looking at how to make a financial contribution, I think that's very, very important. So if this is going to be discussed at the full council meeting, I think that maybe we'll get a full picture of what it is we can actually propose to do as a council, and that's happening only in a couple of days' time. So I think that the recommendations that are in there, if they were part of something bigger, I think could be workable. But I would urge, I don't have a vote on this committee, so I can't make proposals, but I would certainly urge that we, instead of making a definitive decision right now, that we wait until the full council to take forward ideas. And look, I'll be honest, I think that the executive parties have to, put their shoulder to this. People are expecting more radical action and don't want to see just something that's repackaged that's already in existence. So I think it is up to the executive parties. I think everybody understands the hardship that's out there, but that this does require the executive parties to kind of acknowledge our district and the challenges that we're facing. So I look forward to the rest of the proposal that we're to have at the full council meeting, and then I'd be able to give a fuller opinion, and I think other people would too, in terms of the proposal. But I have talked to people who encouraged this proposal, and when they seen it, they said that's not exactly what we were hoping for, and that's not exactly what we were proposing. So I acknowledge that hard work's been put in by Una and the team in terms of developing this. So just on the point about Belfast, I'm not sure if Belfast were ahead of us. I think that they had an emergency meeting and a proposal was put forward. There was some debate about how much they would take out of the reserves. But it wasn't necessarily something that was developing over months. I think it was a meeting that was done with some speed, and the council made a decision based on the unforeseen economic challenges that a lot of people are facing across the Belfast district, and of course we are in a very similar, if not worse, situation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. I'm looking who's next. Councillor Farrell.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but I was on the working group that met twice to develop these plans, and I would have proposed the proposal if I was on the committee, but obviously standing orders wouldn't allow that. I just want to touch on something Councillor Harkin said there, that this hardship fund isn't as we had originally sort of envisaged or intended. The reality is, and I made this at the working group, is that council doesn't have the capacity, the expertise, and mightn't have the power to deliver a hardship fund. So I made the proposal, given the urgency and given the immediacy, that Christmas is 3 weeks away, and we have to do something to help people in need. And the common sense solution to that was to support the existing appeal from Salvation Army and St Vincent de Paul. So the SLPs totally support this approach. And I welcome the intervention from the Chief Executive that there may be some sort of financial assistance that we can offer, because I think that's appropriate. We can't go to large employers and say, contribute to the scheme to help the people of Derry, if we don't throw some money in there as well. So thanks to everybody that was involved in the working group, the officers that committed time to this, and hopefully it is beneficial to people across the city and district that need help and support in the next few weeks. Thanks.
Apologies, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair, for letting us in. Thank you, Una, for the report. And I understand where Councillor Harkin's coming from. We've had a number of meetings of the working group, and it's sort of, it was spinning around that fast in my head, but I was getting dizzy. With the applications and legalities and who, what, where, but just with what was to the forefront is we were looking to help people. That was ultimately to the forefront, and how we could do that and around. So I welcome some of the further exploratory talks and engagements and some announcements by Chief Executive. Just if I can maybe just add maybe something to those discussions between whatever now and Friday, if you're having them. Just if there was a pot becoming available, and that pot tended to grow with donations, and talking to those large organisations that do great work, and they do great work regionally, but that through their discussions, that one is whatever money becomes available, it's additional money to these organisations, that it's spent locally and that it's spent within a window of a time frame that we are looking to set. I'm not having no go at any organisation, but there's a lot of organisations that have large reserves, and we just don't want to be donating to those reserves for the sake of it. It needs to be additional. It needs to be spent, and it needs to be spent locally and in a certain time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And I know I'm not a member of this committee, but I sit on the committee, the Hardship Fund Committee. And I just want to commend the officers and the report they brought forward to the committee today. I think it's a very, very true reflection of the discussion, and there was quite a lengthy discussion ongoing and what we might do and what we might do early for Christmas. And I welcome the Chief Executive's idea there about maybe some good news for Friday. There were long discussions around how the legalities, and we know the difficulties on there. But one thing, the Hardship Fund, we want to get it right, and we want to get the quality of experience. And we have quite a number of groups out there, Chair, who have very, very much great experience in delivering across the board. But a lot of time was spent as well, Chair, and around. Yeah, I know we're going to focus on businesses and big businesses. I know they talk about big business here, but you know, generally in the council area, it's generally the smaller businesses that are more charitable than some of the big businesses. And we all know the circumstances that business or local businesses are in now at the moment. We see a lot of even the big ones going to the wall over this last couple of days. But I would agree with some message going across here, no matter what incentive was out there, that we shop local in the current climate we're in. Thanks, Chair, for allowing me in.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. Can I just get a bit of clarification then, maybe from Una? Are we saying that then that if this recommendation to accept what's in the report currently goes forward to Friday and money is made available, are we still able then to go forward on the basis that we have two phases? So if money's made, if council are in a position to make a financial contribution, are we still able to work something around that we can do for Christmas? Because I agree with what some of the other members have said. And I know we are up against it time-wise, but so are families out there. And and if we can move that proposal forward, perhaps on Friday, I don't know, John, maybe if you can give us some guidance. Certainly, I would be supportive of still being able to do phase 1 and 2, because look, we've still got 3 weeks to Christmas, and if at all possible, I'd like to be able to say that we can show something for the discussions that we've had up till now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I'm suspecting that what we're looking at here is an immediacy to be dealt with, and a more strategic approach following on from that immediacy of the Christmas parade, as what you're saying there, Councillor Doyle.
If you want to just clarify the thinking at the moment, based on Una's report, would that be helpful?
Certainly, Chief Executive.
Yeah. I suppose technically, you've got a report before you today that if it was recommended by Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, doesn't actually get ratified until the 18th of December, which is full council. And obviously that's an issue with timing. So what we're suggesting, and we're maybe we're being a little bit creative with decision making here.
Suspension of standing orders.
Not quite as far as that, but what we're suggesting, if we sense that members are comfortable with this two-phased approach, then at the reconvened council meeting on Friday, we would advise members, well, that appears to be the case from Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, and therefore we're happy to promote from that moment businesses to contribute to the two organisations. towards a fund for Christmas. And also, we would bring to you on Friday deliberations we'll have between now and then in relation to whether we as council can also contribute to that short-term Christmas fund and potentially how much. So I just can't be drawn on it today because we have a wee bit of work to do around that. But there's a question of A, can we contribute to it, and B, how much? And then if members were comfortable to proceed on that basis on Friday, we would launch the promotion around it. And if we can make a financial contribution, we would. But we would still stick to the two-staged approach. This would just be an initial potential injection of cash into stage one.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I note that the proposer, Councillor Duffy, is content with what the Chief Executive has outlined there. I also note that Councillor Doyle wishes to come in again. I will allow you very briefly, Councillor Doyle, quick comment. We'll move to the vote.
Appreciate that, Chair. No, I appreciate John and Nuna and your team for bringing this forward. I did ask actually about that, if we were able to bring the minutes from this meeting to Friday and then be able to do that. So I'm happy that that's been looked at, and appreciate you being creative about it. I'm certainly happy with to move forward as agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Proposed by Councillor Duffy, seconded by Alderman Clontic. Are members content? I see nothing adverse there. Declare that recommendation passed. And now moving to something relative to the last discussion. Item 9. I think it's Karen. Are you taking that one forward?
Yes, Chair, members, thank you. Members, this is a preliminary report based on recent announcements that the Executive have provided funding to the Department for Communities for a food support programme during 2021. We received the high-level communication on this just the day prior to the release of these papers, and we felt it opportune to bring an update to you this evening with a full report on the more detail of the scheme to be made available for consideration in the Health and Community Committee. So members, effectively, we're seeking approval tonight for the confirmation that we would accept the funding and we would provide our officers with the authority to move forward and develop it. We've done some initial consultation with people already involved in our food pilot, and there are a series of workshops being undertaken by the Department for Communities this week. They relate to food support, to volunteering, to other regional initiatives that the department are undertaking, and we're trying to tease out specifically at this point which of those will be administered via council, and therefore we'll provide the staffing resource to assist and facilitate with that process, and which are going to be taken forward as streams through other organisations such as Neighbourhood Renewal or regional organisations. So members, we've obviously learned significantly from the first phase of the food programme, so we're building upon that to ensure that this is more bespoke, that it meets need more specifically than the last scheme. And we understand that there is an extensive budget within the department. We don't yet know what our finalised allocation will be. We anticipate it may be in the region for this particular phase of food support, somewhere in the region of £200,000. As we progress, we will look at the other governance and audit implications from administering the programme. And members, if you could give your approval this evening to allow that work to proceed at pace, so you're fully informed at Health and Community, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher, do you wish to propose a recommendation?
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Next person.
There is an immediacy for this to get out again, like the last topic in conversation. There is an emergency, so I'm happy for it to get out as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Before we move on, is there a seconder for that?
I second it.
Alderman Breslin, thank you. I'm not putting it yet. There's further wish to discuss. Councillor Michaela.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not sending the video. It affects the audio if I do. So, you'll hear me, but you won't see me. I just obviously thanks Karen for the report and great to endorse the report and the content within it. Obviously, I want to offer my sincere thanks to the Minister for her efforts in ensuring that money is available for those most in need and vulnerable within our communities. This is welcoming news, this extra hardship fund from DFC. It will go a long way to ensure there is those who are in most need within our communities will get the advantage of it. Obviously, in terms of the previous funding that came out of DFC for communities in terms of hardship fund or food funding, it would be only right to say that communities and groups across the Derry City and Strabane District Council worked well. They worked collectively and collaboratively, and ensuring those that needed it got it. And I know I note the content of the report and the wraparound services that it will provide for many people. The reality is for the working poor also. So I'm happy to endorse the report and the content within it, and commend everybody for the work ahead and the work that has been previously.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. I see no more speakers. You have it proposed and seconded to endorse or accept the recommendation. I don't see anyone going against that, and that's the case. The recommendation is passed. And we'll move to item 11. Thank you, Karen, for that. Alfie, are you presenting the 6-month financial outturn?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is to consider and approve our 6-month financial position and outturn. The report sets out, members, just for background information, the table in section 2.1, a breakdown of our budget of 75 million in gross expenditure for the year, and the key sources of income that make up that budget, with obviously rates income and service income being the two very key components, and rates income in particular, which provides us with 80% of our overall funding for our services. Members, it's obviously important you're provided with regular financial updates in that to identify issues, and this report sets out the 6-month position, which has obviously been very significantly impacted by the pandemic. Members, the report is really in two sections, the position pre-government support and the position post-government support, and thankfully those are very different positions. So in relation to pre-government support, there's a detailed report in the appendix, which is summarised in section 3.1 of the report, which sets out a very significant £3.46 million deficit, slightly offset by additional rate support grant income of 89k, but still a remaining deficit there of 3.37 million. Members, the issues giving rise to that is obviously a loss of income across the majority of our services, with facilities being closed, a range of exceptional costs that we're incurring, certainly within the Environment Directorate, and waste management cost pressures. Members, converse to that, it is positive to report at this point that planning income is actually ahead of our budget at this point, and also ahead of 1920 levels at the 6-month point, but that's obviously an exception to the rule. Moving on, members, post-government support, thankfully the position has been fully mitigated, that's following extensive engagement and bids through the Finance Officers Group and SOLAS with the departments. Significant funding has been received by local government. We've been able to obtain access to the furlough scheme, and this council has been able to draw down over £1 million of funding in that up to the end of September. The 11 councils have secured a combined 85 million in support from Department for Communities in relation to income losses and exceptional costs, as well as a further 15 million from DERA for waste management losses. And specifically to this council, members, we have obviously secured now over 2 million in funding in relation to City of Derry Airport, which totally mitigates any pressures for this financial year. So members, the updated position is now set out in section 3.4 in the report, a substantially reduced deficit, and pleasing to report members that since the report was submitted, that position has now been fully mitigated following a further 1.8 million allocation from Department for Communities for Q2. Not reflected in the report, members, is any loss associated with loss of rates income. We do expect, members, obviously, that may be impacted certainly in the medium term, and it's obviously a significant uncertainty. Again, members, the significant reliefs that have been available for businesses this year from government has hopefully substantially mitigated that position for this financial year. Also, members, you'll be aware we have set aside substantial provision in our reserves as part of our contingency plan. And alongside that, the 11 councils and Land and Property Services have jointly engaged University of Ulster Economic Policy Centre to provide a detailed analysis of potential rate-based implications as we move forward into the next financial year. So finally, members, in relation to the rates process for 21-22, we've had an initial full council engagement with another one planned before Christmas. Obviously, there's a lot of information as officers that we're waiting to receive that will have very significant implications for our rates process. Obviously, a lot of the issues highlighted in the report will continue into the 21-22 rates process. So I'll just update you on the key developments that have happened since the last full council briefing. Firstly, members, a substantial financial bid has been made for financial losses through the 11 councils through Department for Communities. We're hopeful that rate-based mitigations or alternatively support for councils will continue into 21-22. Again, members, that's at an early stage of discussion, and we have made asks for a range of other non-cash asks, such as extension of rate-based deadline given the uncertainty and capitalisation direction. So all those conversations are ongoing, members. So in summary, the 2021 position has now been stabilised, members, from the previous report due to government support. Significant challenges remain for our 21-22 rates process, and we're working hard to mitigate those through engagement with government and savings proposals. And in terms of recommendations, you're asked to approve the 6-month financial position at 30th of September 20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alfie, again for an extremely comprehensive financial report. I have 2 requests to come in on this. Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Alfie. We'll take us back, folks, again to March, April of this year in terms of the financial projections that were being made at the time. Scary financial projections in terms of this council, and other councils obviously doing the same. And the Minister for Finance has responded, both in terms of the ask previously and this current ask, and it means that we are still in the position where, as I said at a previous committee meeting a few weeks ago, we discussed capital projects and projections for major infrastructure projects over the next few years, that we're in a position to still look at those commitments, even though we are in an absolutely unprecedented financial position globally because of the pandemic. So the Minister has responded in very, very clear terms around making sure contributions were made available. In terms of the next year, what Alfie has said around the rates, I think is a key point. And we're obviously moving on the rates process now very, very soon. Because the Minister has responded previously, I would be very, very confident he will listen to Council's concerns, not just our Council, but all 11, through Solace in particular. And from our perspective, we're confident that there will be very, very sympathetic ear to those asks. We can't be very specific at the minute because, again, even as a Council, we're still trying to crystallise what the ask is because the rate picture remains so uncertain, and taking even into account announcements of recent days around some of the high street retailers, which obviously doesn't help the situation any further. But as I said, the Minister has responded in the past. I think that there'll be an open door in terms of hearing Council's concerns around the rates process, not the rates concerns we have, not just for this year, but next year. And we look forward to seeing, hopefully, a positive outcome of those discussions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Chair, and happy to endorse the recommendation as well. I think whenever we read that line on it, thankfully this position has been completely mitigated. It was like getting a Christmas present, I'm sure. We never thought we'd be in this position at this stage because there was a bit of so much doom and gloom for so long. But I think we really do need to acknowledge the very substantial intervention by regional and central government collectively and getting us to this position. And obviously we have the uncertainty going forward about our rate space, but we can only go really a step at a time in this. And I would be hopeful as well that further interventions will come down the line as they're needed. And I just let's say, Alfie, thank you very much for the work that you have done here, to John, to all the Solace team, because I think the power of those 11 councils working together has really helped to achieve this absolutely fantastic outcome, that we are sitting in a situation now that the position has been completely mitigated. So thank you for that report.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair. And like other speakers, I just want to thank Alfie and his team for the work that they've done on this, working not just on behalf of our ratepayers, but also in conjunction with the other local councils as well, to try and extract from the Assembly the types of finance that we have presented here this afternoon, because I think that is worth noting that across a range of government services, including obviously our airport, government has stepped in and provided that support to us, and I think that that those ministers in the executive that have done that need to be thanked for making the 6 month output that we have today to be in such a good position in comparison to where we were thinking we might be back 6 months ago. Like every 6 month report, you start to think about the next 6 months, obviously, and beyond that. And I think that if you look at where we are at, even in today's announcements about the high street, we will be seeing other businesses struggling, and many of those businesses aren't able to trade in this month of December when they should be getting in their sizable income that they rely on to keep themselves trading throughout the rest of the 11 months. So I don't think that we are past the difficulties economically in any sense, but nonetheless, for today's report, it is a positive one. And as I said, those ministers that have stepped up to the plate I think is to be welcomed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. And no, very briefly, just again to thank Alfie and his team for all of the work in this. It has been it's been an incredible 6 to 8 months so far financially, and to be in this position at this stage is excellent. However, we do have the current challenge of looking ahead, and just updating members that the next full council rates briefing is now scheduled for Monday the 14th at 4 p.m. Siobhan was either going to send that out today or tomorrow just to notify you, but a bit of advance notice just for the diaries. Again, that's not a full council meeting, it's a full council briefing as per the last time, so that we give you the up-to-date information this side of Christmas in relation to projections for next year. So thank you, Chair, for letting me in.
Thank you, Chief Executive. One last speaker before I look for a proposal. Councillor Gallagher.
For letting us in. It was just more a wee bit of an update, but Alfie, thanks. Very detailed report. Getting across it definitely makes it much easier to see and your eye and understand. But definitely understand a lot of difficulty of trying to reconcile it from yourself and the rest of your team. It was just maybe just a wee bit of update, and I was wondering, is there any update? Do you know on the appeal that HMRC was possibly making? I know there was a time scale on when they had it in. I'm not sure if it's up yet, but was there any update on that?
Yeah, the time scale for the appeal is 12th of December. So there's been no developments since the case. So we have to wait to 12th of December to find out if there will be an appeal or not.
Would you read that as positive if nothing getting submitted to date?
I don't know.
No,
It could be submitted at any time up to that point. So we're just holding out to that time.
12th?
The 12th of December, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Cooper to propose the recommendation.
Yes, Chair, absolutely. Happy to do so.
Councillor Riley to second.
Yeah, happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Don't see anything against that, so I'm declaring that recommendation passed. Moving to item 12, Richard, I think, is taking this, the EU successor funding.
Yes, good evening.
Thank you, Richard.
Chair members.
And hello.
Hi. Paper is reports to update members on the UK government's proposed EU successor funding, specifically the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and Solace and so I omitted the word NILGA there, joint position paper entitled EU successor funding in Northern Ireland. You've got a number of appendices there, including a summary in the full report. In addition to the report, I think it's also noted in there that there would potentially be verbal updates, and I actually sort of have three key pieces of verbal sort of information to update you on. As you're aware, with the imminent exit from the EU, all EU structural funding in Northern Ireland will cease, with currently no new funding available thereafter. That includes the European Regional Development Fund, European Social Fund, and European the Rural Development Programme. And one of the facts that we do know is that the Peace and Interreg funding will continue through the new Peace Plus programme. In respect to that, had an update today from SUP in respect to the statutory consultation on the programme, which we were expecting, or they were hoping to launch in November. Unfortunately, because the budgets haven't yet been signed off on individual programmes, they've been able to do that, and they're now hoping that they will get confirmation of programme budgets between now and the new year, and they're hoping to launch a statutory consultation with the budget allocations across the various priorities in the new year. In respect to going back to the Solace paper, in early 2020, the Solace commissioned a consultancy, EcosGen, to undertake a research study to look at potential EU successor funding in Northern Ireland, and those documents are provided for you. I don't intend to go through all the key issues here, given that the time wise. Just like to focus on some of the key points of that report. Some of the key issues there is that the facts that we do know is that the SPF is successor to EU structural funds. It's not a continuation. So pretty much the government's view, they're looking at from their eyes a clean slate. There's no commitment at this stage to rolling forward the current structural allocations of the programme or area, and no commitment to taking forward ERDF and ESF financial breakdown across priorities and themes similar to what's there. It will have a UK specific remit and be shaped by UK policy objectives, particularly the industrial strategy, and again, they've made the point that it won't be EU structural funding, sort of a legacy of that. Again, it's not clear which departmental budgets the UK SPF will be funded from, although they have made further announcements of the spending route, which I'll go through in a minute. The main focus of FCS will be to tackle inequalities between communities and raise productivity, and they're particularly focusing on the levelling up agenda that the government is focusing on. In terms of this report by Solace and NILGA, one of the key points that was agreed sector-wide was the quantum of money available to Northern Ireland, as it will be set by Westminster and will be provided as a block grant. One of the key issues is that it remains ring-fenced for the purposes of replacing the EU funds and focusing on those areas most in need. That it's hypothecated, so it can be directed to activities that are additional and deliver value-added benefits for Northern Ireland and sub-regional regions. Again, there's a number of key factors set out on the page. As you see, there's quite a number of them. I don't intend to go through those. I think if you have questions, we can certainly consider those. Then in respect to just moving to the spending review and the first or second of the sort of verbal updates, basically the key points that have been issued by the government as part of the spending review or announced was that the fund will be ramped up over time to at least match EU funding receipts across the UK, averaging 1.5 billion per year. There's no clarification yet at this stage what that means for any of the devolved regions. They will be starting this with funding in 2021 to help local areas prepare over the 2021-22 financial year for the introduction of the UK SPF. So that tells you that they're anticipating kind of a more fuller launch, or not anticipating one until 2022. That they're looking at providing money in the tune of around 200 to 220 million to support communities to pilot programs and new approaches. The focus will be on the UK SPF to help level up and create opportunities across the region, across the UK for people and places. It will be UK-wide and using the new financial assistance powers in the UK Internal Market Bill. The government will set out further details in a UK-wide investment framework, which is to be published in the spring. They have outlined two portions of the proposed new programme. The first will target places most in need across the UK, such as ex-industrial areas, deprived towns, rural and coastal communities. It will support people and communities to open up new opportunities, spurring regeneration and innovation. And the funding profile for this will be set in the next spending review in the spring. It will have three areas of three priority areas: investing in people and skills tailored to local needs, such as work-based training and supplementing tailored national programs; investing in communities and place, including cultural and sporting facilities, green and rural infrastructure. And then the third one is investment for local businesses, including to support innovation, green tech, adaptation, and tailored to local needs. Places receiving funding will be asked to agree specific outcomes to target within a UK-wide framework. And then the second portion that they announced will be that the UK SPF will be targeted differently to people most in need through bespoke employment skills programs that are tailored to local need. This will support improved employment outcomes for those in and out of work in specific cohorts of people who face labour market barriers. In addition to the UK SPF, they've also announced the Levelling Up Fund, which again isn't directly linked to UK SPF. It's actually in addition. They've announced a 4 billion fund, which will be for England, with 0.8 billion for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, which will be distributed in the usual way. This fund will be jointly managed between HMT, Department for Transport and Ministry for Housing and Local Government. Any local area can bid for local projects. It will take a holistic place-based approach to meeting the needs of local areas. Must be spent in this Parliament. Projects must deliver real impact. Proposals must command local support, including that of the local MP, and they will fund. It will fund infrastructure for everyday life, such as a bypass, less traffic, libraries, museums, galleries, upgrades to railway stations, better high streets. And again, the government's going to set out further details on how to support or how this programme will work in the new year. That's the key sort of update on that. happy to take any questions on that, and the recommendations that members are asked to consider the solace NI report in relation to the successor funding.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Cooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to Richard for the report, and the variable update I think is even more interesting than the report. I mean, the report and the various reports that were on the item and the pack. I mean, in terms of prosperity fund, our sort of suspicion would have been it was a lack of prosperity fund that was being proposed in terms of what we were expecting the British government would introduce as a replacement and not a continuation, as you said, of the existing EU funding. I think even the fact that we've had an update now from the EU around the continuation of peace funds and Interreg about how that will roll out in the next few months. The fact that we now have that detail from themselves, but we're still only getting outline proposals from the British government, that speaks volumes as far as we're concerned about the British government's approach to all of this, the last-minute.com approach to it. And out of your verbal update there, I mean, there's a number of things there. You mentioned about the ring fencing in particular, because, you know, the big suspicion here would be that even this lip service that they'll match any existing EU funding. And again, I'm writing this down based on your verbal update. The suspicion we would have here is that won't be ring fenced and will be sort of then claimed to be contributions from the British government in terms of the prosperity fund, when it's actually in many cases money that would have been should be going to block grant. There's just so much uncertainty here. It's scary, and the particular fact that we are obviously going to be impacted more in terms of Brexit than England, Scotland, or Wales because of our land border. Even taking aside the fact the protocol has been agreed, it's just so last minute in terms of the information we're getting, in terms of preparing for it, and you know, overall, we just don't take the British government at their word. It's as simple as that. So this reassurance or promise that they will match contributions, and in particular the idea that, you know, it'll go to areas most in need, we'll believe that when we see it. As far as we're concerned, the North will be at the bottom of the pecking order, and we'll have to be making additional lobbies to try and make sure that we get what we deserve. The EU, despite its faults, and it has many, the EU had a very proactive approach in terms of supporting projects in the North, not just through peace, but through all sorts of other structural funding, and in particular in terms of the farming community. The idea that the British government will replicate that, even in ideological terms, I don't see the British government in the longer term providing that same level of support, and I think that will be to the detriment of everybody living in the North, Unionist or Republican, going forward. So the proof will be in the pudding as far as we're concerned, but thanks to Richard for the update.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and I would say thank you to the United Kingdom government for coming up with this fund. Yes, it's at an early stage yet, but it's certainly very welcome to try to alleviate some of the issues that will arise out of Brexit. Yes, it is last minute, and the money has to be additional to the normal block grant. I think it is really important that the levelling up and that the disadvantaged areas do come out of this better off. And those of us who take up our seats in Westminster will ensure that we use all of our influence to try to make sure that the Northern Ireland benefits out of this fund. I think it is timely. It's late coming to the table, yes, but I think it is timely that at least it is now coming out before the Brexit, before we exit Europe now in a couple of weeks' time. I think the issues, and it was good to hear your report, Richard, because it sort of put it into simpler language that I could understand. But I mean, the fact that people in skills, investing in communities and local businesses are the ones that are going to set to benefit from this. But I say we will obviously use all of our influence in Westminster to make sure that Northern Ireland gets as good a deal as possible, the best deal possible for all the people of Northern Ireland, because after all, we are a disadvantaged community, and we do need you know, the whole poverty in this country has not been alleviated, so we will certainly be using our influence there. Thank you for the report, Richard, and if you need an endorsement, happy to endorse.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks also to Richard for the report. There are many questions. I'm not sure, Richard, any of them are for you as such, but certainly there are lots of questions about how this government are going to treat citizens in Northern Ireland, citizens like myself who voted against leaving the EU. We saw the benefit of being in the EU. We campaigned to stay in the EU. Unfortunately, the citizens in Britain that voted has effectively taken us out of the EU against our wishes, and it is, as Councillor Cooper indicated, alarming that the British government, who told us, "Oh, we have an oven-ready Brexit," we find ourselves now here in December, days away from the Brexit date, and still only getting these types of funds, these types of announcements, and no real detail as to how it impacts us. Only recently, during the comprehensive spending review, our MP for Foyle, Colm Eastwood, raised these points at Westminster. He talked about how the people of Derry, Edinburgh, Cardiff, across these islands would be wondering what is happening about this, and having real concerns that the funds that are being talked about will actually be retained in Whitehall for Boris and his cronies to spend how they wish, as opposed to actually allowing the people in the devolved nations the opportunity to shape the funds. So we have big concerns about this. We know that the EU and its bodies like the SEPUB are doing what they can to continue on funding, but I would be very reluctant and very cautious about, unlike the previous speaker, Alderman McClintock, who is saying we should be thankful and saying that we should be grateful for the British government's work on this. It is clear that we are in a worse place now, that we are on the precipice of Brexit than we were prior to the vote to leave or remain. We're still glad that we voted to remain, and if you look at how things have panned out over the past couple of years, I think that's evident that we are going to find ourselves on an area like ours that is suffering on high deprivation at the far end, away from London, is really going to suffer. So we accept the report as presented by Richard. We thank him for the work you've done in relation to it, but there are many questions left unanswered. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We have nobody else wishing to come in. Richard, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, just on a couple of the points, right? Just because I'm conscious that I'd sped through that quite quickly. Just in one of the comments that was raised by Councillor Cooper in respect to ring fencing. This report, the key purpose of this is that it's now gone to all MPs, all MAs, all ministers, both here in the executive and the key ones in Westminster, for their consideration. Obviously, one of the key issues it's pressing for is that we don't get, whether this obviously we'll get this or not is yet to be seen, that as a region we don't get a penny less than the receipts we currently receive from the EU through structural funding. And the second point is that obviously when they do decide how much there's going to be, that when that money then comes down to us as a region, that again that money is ring fenced for the purposes for which it has been agreed that it comes down to us on, which is to be the UK a shared prosperity fund that will actually be used across the region to use the government's term to level up, and obviously to use the term that we use to balance the regional disparities that we have in locally in the region. So the key thing, there's obviously still conversations to be had, still lobbying to be had, which obviously Nilga Solis are focusing on in respect to conversations both with Westminster and with the executive in terms of exactly how that programme will roll out. And also, obviously, you have attached as part of this a report that was adopted by the executive on this. Yep, that's the key thing. Also, just wanted to mention that in the spending review as well, one of the things that was announced was rural and agriculture was mentioned, that they have made some form of commitment towards supplementing the remaining EU funding. The farmers and land managers across the UK will receive the agri-environment and rural development projects. And they gave a figure that 1.1 billion has been set aside to support farmers in the devolved regions. There's all 3 devolved regions for 21 and 22. We can obviously include all these points in the minutes for a more complete update on that.
Thank you, Richard. I don't see any other comments. Can I have a proposal for the recommendations?
Opposed, Chair. Hillary.
Sorry, who?
Hillary, Councillor.
Alderman Matlisic, thank you very much. And the seconder?
I second it.
Seconded by Alderman Breslin. No opposition to that, so I'm taking it that the recommendation is approved. Richard, just on behalf of us all, very, very comprehensive report, very complicated report, and will continue to be so until we get out the far end of it. Can I thank you and congratulate you on the report that was brought together? I just want to personally say that, I mean, European and Irish government intransigence has brought us down to the wire in efforts to mitigate any of this, the effects, the impacts of our leaving the leaving the European Union. And I would add that it is my own personal view that the Northern Ireland Protocol is indeed contrary to the aims of the Belfast Agreement, but that's a personal viewpoint. As Chair of Committee, I thank you for your work on this so far, and no doubt there's more work to be done. Thank you. And can we move to item 13? Thank you, Richard. Una, you're back in action again on item 13.
I am.
Rural Issues Group, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the governance arrangements for the establishment of a rural focus group and to seek your approval of hosting the first meeting of the group in January 21. Members, the first couple of sections of the report is just to recap on the decision that was made at October meeting, governance and strategic planning, and also to outline in terms of what was considered to be the key role for the Rural Issues Group. And taking that role, it really helped to inform what the structure and what the membership of the group would look like. And you can see really from section 3.3 is where I would like to draw your attention to. And I suppose what we could summarise is that the key characteristics in terms of the composition of the Rural Issues Group really is about inclusivity and flexibility. So you can see that it's considered to be very, very important that we would have any elected interest in rural issues would be invited to attend this group. And also with respect to government departments, you can see that it's considered to be very important that the work of the Rural Issues Group is embedded within the Strategic Inclusive Growth Partnership, and therefore we would actually seek the membership of the statutory bodies coming from the Growth Partnership itself. And we've specifically mentioned a number of those departments, and members, you may have some others that you would ask us to consider. And the importance here with respect to that representation really is that a lot of the issues that have been identified that are by the Rural Issues Group are not actually under the remit of Council, and therefore it's really important that members of statutory and other bodies are participating on this group, because they'll actually be able to take forward a number of the issues that have been identified. Members, in addition to the statutory representation, you can see that it's also suggested that we would have the community and voluntary sector representation, particularly the 3 rural local growth partnerships and the Derry and Strabane, LAG, Rapid and Farmers groups, that the membership should remain open, and that's really to allow anybody else that we would consider to be appropriate or that would be of particular interest, depending on the subject matter, that they would be invited to participate and also help us to shape in terms of the discussion that will go forward. It's further proposed in terms of the chairing of the meeting that it will be co-chaired, one by an elected member and the other a non-elected member. And then in section 3.4, members, we've set out the proposed governance arrangements, and you'll know from our previous discussions that we said that this group would sit within the governance of the Strategic Growth Partnership as a cross-cutting thematic group. So a lot of the work that this group will do, the Rural Issues Group, will report back in to that, as well as individual council departments and also individual government departments and agencies. It's considered that it would be appropriate for the group to have 3 symposiums per year, and that's really on the big issues that the Rural Issues Group would want to focus on. And that would be in addition to 3 other meetings that would take place during the year, and that would be to consider other issues in relation to the growth partnership, the local growth plans, and also in terms of council's own business in terms of its normal work. And as appropriate, we'll be taking papers directly through those committees in relation to any rural issues that may be identified. It's also proposed, members, that this group will be established initially for a 3-year period, and that will be subject to review. Notwithstanding that if we find that during the course of those 3 years that there are further recommendations that we would want to take back, we will come back with further updates and reports to this committee here. Members, you can see from section 4 that there's no financial issues identified, that the running and the operation of this group can be met within existing budgets. And we also would want to just remind members that the rural issues is cross-departmental. It's considered to be a strategic issue, and therefore different reports will come through the various departments and committees of council in relation to any rural issues that may come forward. So, members, we propose that you accept the governance arrangements that have been set out in the report, and that you also endorse the fact that the first meeting of the Rural Issues Group would take place in January 21. And Chair, happy to take any comments or queries that members may have now in relation to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Una. And from the Chair, I just simply want to say I wholeheartedly welcome the potential for the establishment of an issues group. I go back to Breeze Rogers in the Assembly talking in terms of having all items rural proofed, and it is this sort of body that can enable that type of idea to be carried on. And we do need rural proofing of all of the issues that we as a local authority deal with. Councillor Boyle, you wish to come in? Michaela Boyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Una, for that. And again, I would like to endorse the report and the content within it, and we're happy to support it. And obviously it's very timely, and I welcome the decision to have the meeting early in the new year. Obviously the impact of Brexit is going to have a big defining factor for us all, particularly in the rural areas. There are many other issues like mobile phone coverage, rural businesses and the communities being affected by Brexit. So, you know, there's a lot of issues around planning as well too. So, I'm delighted to see the content of the report what members have been asking for, particularly on 3.5 that the rural group will be, with the assistance of the departments and other stakeholders, setting out its own programme of work. So happy to endorse it and propose it as it is, and you know, welcome the fact that members will have that opportunity now in the new year to bring the issues to the rural issues group, and working with everybody on board with it. Thank you, Una.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle, and the recommendation that proposed. Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Una, for bringing this forward to us with that amount of detail today. I think the establishment of a rural group was badly needed, and I think it's the clarification that any elected member with an interest in rural affairs can sit on it is very welcome, because I know we had proposed one name, and yet I know that several of our councillors with an interest, particularly in the rural affairs, wish to be on it. So whether you want those names forward or whether you'll send out a general email about it, maybe maybe you could clarify for us. So really, I'm happy just to second the proposal coming before us to approve and endorse the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Proposed and seconded. You're looking for clarification there. Before I bring Councillor Riley in, do you want to clarify that, Una?
Yes, Chair. The clarification is that the invitation will go out initially to all elected members, and we would invite elected members to identify if they wish to see further indications in terms of their membership. So at this moment in time, it's open, and if a member wishes to join at a later stage, that opportunity would also exist going forward.
Thank you, Una. What do we see? You're happy enough, Councillor Riley, move on? Councillor Riley?
Yes, I am. I put it in the chat box, Chair. Thanks, Una, for that clarification.
Okay. Councillor Fleming?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome the report and thank for the work, and acknowledge that within the report it sets out the number of bodies that are already in existence in terms of dealing with rural issues, but I think this is weapon in terms of people in the rural being able to strategically and cross the rural, because in terms of some people appreciate the rural as we call it, there's many communities perimeter of Derry that are mightn't be seen as rural and fields, but they have many issues as well as the ones that are retaining in the outer ring of the rural. So the areas of the rural, the 3 areas of the rural currently covered by community planning partnerships, the fact that them that's coming together, and also welcome the idea of the 3 symposiums over the course of a year, engagement with the public, and we've seen very worthwhile engagement that we've done around the community planning process. So that's been built into the work of this group would, I think, add to our direction and forward issues on the people across the rural. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Members, it's been proposed second the recommendations be adopted. Nobody speaking against that. I declare the recommendations adopted then. And thank you, Una, for that. And we look forward to your ongoing work on the issue. Item 14, Northern Ireland Local Government Association consultation. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to brief members on the consultation initiated by NILGA on transformation and driving practical change in local government. The chair of the Reform, Devolution and Improvement Network, which is coordinated by NILGA, has recently written to the Chief Executive to seek a corporate consultation response on reform and additional powers and improving existing powers, resources and services of local government in Northern Ireland in the context of what is needed to sustain councils and revitalise communities. The correspondence from the chair of the NILGA group is attached in Appendix 1, Chair, for members' consideration. The consultation is due to close on the 11th of December, and NILGA have provided council with a questionnaire pro forma, which seeks our views on the biggest issues facing council going into 2021, triggered primarily by COVID-19 and how they can be alleviated. Chair, the consultation questionnaire has been considered and a draft consultation response is prepared and attached to Appendix 2. And the draft response, Chair, has been prepared and proposed answers have been based on previous reports which have been tabled at this committee in relation to financial planning, and also the approved corporate consultation response we submitted to NILGA's programme for local government, tabled and approved in October 2015. So, Chair, subject to members' views and comments, it's recommended that members approve the draft consultation response attached to Appendix 2.
Thank you, Rachel, for summarising very, very succinctly what is a very long report to actually go through. Any member comment? Nothing in the chat box. Can I ask for a proposal?
Proposed.
Second, and Chair, whatever.
Sorry, who proposed? Nuala, have you picked that up? I couldn't hear it here. I presume it's picked up. It is proposed and seconded. Are you content with that, Chief Executive? The proposal and seconded?
I think it's Councillor Mooney, Chair.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Sorry, I couldn't hear it. Proposed by Councillor Mooney, seconded by
Fleming, if you wish. Councillor Fleming.
thank you, Paul. Councillor Fleming. Proposed, seconded. Nobody against. Accepted the recommendations, Rachel. And you're also taking item 15, which we now move to.
Yes, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek endorsement of participation and confirmation of an elected member nominee to join a steering group working towards the planning and delivery of universal basic income trials in Northern Ireland. Members will be aware that previously we've had a presentation to your October Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, and this follows a previous council motion. We've since received correspondence from UBI dated the 19th of November, and they're looking for a representative from council to join the steering group. The first meeting's taken place on the 12th of January 2020, and the correspondence agenda and draft terms of reference are attached to Appendix 1 for members' consideration. Chair, might be worth noting that the correspondence, they state that the council should nominate an officer, an elected member who has either presented a motion or chaired a committee supportive of UBI. So, Chair, it is recommended that members endorse the approach to nominate an elected member to attend this UBI trial steering group. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you. Rachel and perhaps John as well. This will be a council nomination as opposed to a nomination from this particular committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. I see a nomination in the box. Councillor Donnelly has nominated Councillor Gallagher. I'll let that sit for the moment, as it's something that may have to, when this report goes to full council, to be actually proposed in full council. Councillor Riley, you wish to come in, and then Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Rachel for talking us through it. No issue with the item, just in terms of how we move forward with the nomination. And thanks for your clarification that you've asked, Chair. Our council has agreed a policy of nominating people through the hunt to outside bodies, so I'm asking for clarification why, if we are moving away from that, if that's to be the case. I don't think we should be. We've agreed that we take things and these types of nominations to new bodies through the hunt, so we will be proposing that we follow that process. If we deviate away from that, then the tradition normally has been that when you nominate one person for one position, it's the mayor, except that from what Rachel is saying, that this group are looking for people who might be consistent with it. So maybe having a mayor and then that person would change every year might be not what they want. So if that option isn't the one to be considered, then we would have a councillor within our own group who would be interested in being proposed for it as well. So I'm sure other parties, I see other people in the chat box want to come in as well. I'm sure other people would want to put their own names forward for this type of body, because it is such an important matter to people. So clarity on the first section, Chair, as to whether or not this falls to be proposed under the rolling the hunt method that we have already. Thank you.
I'll defer to yourself, Chief Executive, on that, but I'm also mindful of the body. Someone who presented a motion or chaired a committee supportive. I'm mindful of that within there, but that is not excluding anybody, I presume, as well. It's just a guidance. Chief Executive.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just clarifying, I mean, in terms of the body that's requesting a nomination, certainly it's a matter for council to decide how to do that, notwithstanding their comments. But Councillor Riley is correct. Normally in situations like this, it either falls in the first instance to the mayor. This is a body that will probably, the nomination will span beyond the lifetime of the current mayor's position. And under those circumstances, it generally is a matter for council to fall back to the DeHunt process.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me. And Councillor Riley covered the points that I wanted to make in relation to DeHunt. And thank you, John, for the clarity around it. I would second Councillor Riley's proposal that we use DeHunt to fill the position. I think that we have established that that's our policy for filling new positions, and we should continue with that, or else we will end up in a confusing situation. Whilst the group, I understand why they want somebody who has a knowledge and understanding and possibly a passion for it. It's up to us as a council to decide who we nominate, and I'm sure from within each of the grouping there would be somebody who would be suitable for nomination. So I would second Councillor Riley's proposal in relation to DeHunt.
I'm not sure, members, if we've lost the chair there. Chair, are you still there?
We can see him, but it's...
My screen is fallen off completely, and Chair?
He's a spinning disc in the middle of a screen.
Vice Chair, do you want to, are you in a position to take over? Hopefully temporarily.
Johnny, send to me, aye?
Yes, please, Councillor Fleming. You okay, Paul?
Sorry, Chair, we were just finishing off an appointment to the steering group.
Paul, John Boyle here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul, John Boyle here. I had put on the chat box. I just wanted to ask the Chief Executive a question, if you're okay with that.
Certainly okay with the question. Councillor Boyle, not sure I'll have the answer, but
I was waiting. This is turning into a calamity here tonight. I have the same issue actually. When you knock on the camera, sometimes it affects the quality of the signal. Chief Executive, in the event that we do move to DeHunt, do you know at this point who that would fall to next? Because again, Councillor Riley did actually suggest it. We weren't much who it was, but if it was a system that we all agreed, and there were those that particularly wanted to push for that particular direction, then have you at this point any idea who that might be, or what individual or party it might fall to?
If I may come back in, John, I've had to go to my iPad. I was on the laptop there. It seems to have frozen in some way or other. My apologies, members. But I've missed obviously some of the conversation there. So, John, can you sum, please?
Just Derek, just to say, I was asking the Chief Executive the question in relation to DeHunt, and I'll not expound on it again. Ultimately, just that the question was simply, is there an indication of who that might fall to next?
Grant.
Chair, through you, I don't actually have the DeHunt tables in front of me, but what we will do following this meeting and prior to full council is we'll email out to all elected members that in respect of this particular item, the DeHunt position falls to, and we'll advise of the party or the independent member.
Could I come on, Chair?
That's
certainly. Yep.
Yes, just to give a bit of input, and I was at the presentation and all the rest. This has the potential to make a massive impact across our district. what I would maybe ask is there a possibility for a number of council members to be involved in it? And when I say that, because in particular, this pilot has the potential to target areas of high deprivation. And when we look at the high deprivation, there's quite a number of areas within the district, both in the city, in Strabane town, and in some rural areas. So it would be good if we got cross representation to a number of members, if that were possible.
But Chair, we can certainly go back and check. I don't think the option exists for more than one. And then the question is how many more than one? But we'll certainly go back and check. We can reflect members' comments on that today if that's the view of committee. And between now and council, as I say, we can come back then with an indication to members on the answer to that question, but also the current situation with regard to the DeHunt positions available.
Are members content if that is clarified? If it is one, and it be more than one, but that the appointment will be made via due council processes. Is that satisfactory? I don't hear any adverse to that, so can I have a proposal to that effect?
Chair, I think that's what Councillor Riley and Councillor Duffy were suggesting, that we apply the usual process.
Yep, that's okay.
So obviously then that inquiry bring back a new a few more names that can maybe get added to.
That's okay. Right. Members agreed? Thank you.
Yep.
By the way, my chat box isn't working on the iPad. I can't get it up on the laptop. So if anybody wants to come in, please let me know verbally. Item 16 is being moved to the January meeting. I'm presuming that members are content with that suggestion from officers that it be moved to the January meeting. Agreed?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, members. That concludes, the items open for information 17, 18, and 19. Is there any member wishes to comment on any one of these? I'll take them one at a time. 17, 18, and 19. There being no further business in open meeting, can I have a proposal that we move to confidential?
Proposed, Chair John Boyle.
Seconded, Mark Riley.
Boyle, Councillor Riley. We are moving to confidential, and I'll wait now for the